Part 58. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 571. Chapter 571. The reason and purpose of the Emperor's favoritism to Xiaju, pack up and leave. Shen Shuwei looked at Ye Yuchen, who looked anxious and jumping up and down. He must have a very good relationship with Ye Suhan. If Ye Suhan didn't want to kill Xiao Jinyan, she could still help. After all, the matter was caused by her. However, Ye Suhan wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan, just like he wanted to kill Ye Yuxi. If she hadn't arrived in time a few days ago, the consequences would be disastrous. Ye Yuchen couldn't help but get a little anxious. Xiaju. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Ye Yuchen. She couldn't tell her about her relationship with Xiao Jinyan, and she couldn't tell her that Ye Suhan wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan. For a moment, she couldn't find a reason to refuse. Seeing her hesitation, Ye Yuchen guessed, Xiaju, you don't want to help the third brother. Shen Shuwei nodded, I don't want to help, but I have my own reasons. Maybe after this experience, he will change those bad habits. Ye Yuchen was a little unhappy when he heard this. You don't understand the third brother too well. I won't force you. After all, you don't remember the past, and you don't forget the feelings of childhood sweethearts. I will think of other ways. Ye Yuchen left without looking back after he finished speaking. Shen Shuwei sighed helplessly and looked down at the snowball in her arms. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing. Why did she always feel uneasy in her heart? In the afternoon, Shen Shuwei brought some supplements to visit the prince. Before entering, she heard a woman crying, and the voice sounded like Ye Enyu. Third brother is too cruel. The prince and he are brothers. How could he be so cruel? Ye Yuxi, who had been in a coma for a day and a night, had just woken up and heard his sister crying, but he didn't care because his whole body was in pain. He frowned in pain. Ye Enyu saw that her brother woke up and wiped her tears. Prince, you are finally awake. I was scared to death. Ye Yuxi opened his mouth and uttered a weak voice, water. Although it was only one word, it was very hoarse. I'll get you some water right away. Ye Enyu stood up and picked up the teacup on the table, then returned to the bed and personally fed the prince water. Ye Yuxi was seriously injured, with 2 broken ribs. He couldn't sit up and could only lie on the bed to drink water. Ye Enyu said as he fed him water, Brother Crown Prince, father has put brother 3 in the confinement room and will execute him with 3 lashes. He has already executed him once last night. Are you relieved? Ye Yuxi paused while drinking water, his eyes full of resentment. Last night, Ye Suhan's crazy behavior almost cost him his life. What does 3 lashes mean? Ye Enyu said indignantly, Brother Crown Prince, you can't let brother 3 go this time. He will definitely compete with you for the position of Crown Prince when he comes back this time. Father is a little partial to him. It would be better if he died in the confinement room this time. Everyone knows how Ye Yuxi became the Crown Prince. Because Ye Suhan suddenly disappeared, the position of Crown Prince had been vacant for too long. Ministers in the court made suggestions one after another, so Ye Yuxi had the opportunity to become the Crown Prince. Of course, Ye Yuxi would not give up. This time, Ye Suhan must never turn over. The position of Crown Prince should have belonged to him. Shen Shuwei had no intention of eavesdropping, but after listening to Ye Enyu's words, she knew that the brothers were not as harmonious as they seemed. She walked in and looked at Ye Yuxi on the bed. His face was very pale and his mental state was not good. He knew the injury when he took his pulse last night. It was very serious. Prince. Ye Yuxi raised his head and looked at the door when he heard the voice. Seeing Feng Guo standing there, he said happily, Xiaju, you are here. His voice was still hoarse and weak. Ye Enyu looked back and saw a trace of disgust in Feng Guo's eyes. If it weren't for her, How could the prince brother be injured like this by Yesuhan? When Shen Shuwei came over, Yesuhan struggled to get up, but was held down by Yenyu in time. Prince brother, you are so seriously injured, how can you get up? Shen Shuwei looked at Yuxi struggling and said immediately, Prince, I just came to take a look and leave immediately. Yuxi was in so much pain that he couldn't sit still at all. He had to give up sitting up and looked up at Fengwu. Xiaju, what happened last night was my fault. I shouldn't have drunk so much. Yuxi looked at her with regret, and he looked so weak that he seemed to faint in the next second. Shen Shuwei didn't want to mention what happened last night at all. After she put down her things, she said, don't mention what happened last night. You should rest more. I'll go back first. After saying that, she turned around and slipped away without waiting for Yuxi to speak. Xiaju Yuxi called out, and frowned when he saw Xiaju's figure disappear at the door. Yenyu saw her brother's lost expression and couldn't help but said, Brother Crown Prince, do you have to marry Fengwu? I think she is a disaster. Whoever gets close to her will be unlucky. Yuxi retracted his gaze and looked at his sister, what do you know? Xiaju, I must marry her. Asterisk. After Shen Shuwei came out from the Crown Prince, she went directly back to Wu Palace. It was better to stay away from them. She didn't want to get involved in the internal struggle of the royal family. As soon as she returned to Wu Palace, Shen Shuwei ordered, close the palace gate and do not see any guests. The two eunuchs guarding the gate looked at each other with doubts in their eyes, but they still closed the palace gate obediently. Shen Shuwei looked back at the closed palace gate, and her anxious heart began to get anxious again. Why would the imperial master come back? If he didn't come back, she wanted to pack up and leave. Just when Shen Shu was praying secretly, a huge head rubbed her back. She felt a little itchy, and when she turned around, she saw a tigress standing behind her. The tiger seemed to like rubbing its head against her, and if she responded, its tail would wag even more happily. She rubbed the tiger's huge head. Such a cute tiger actually had the idea of packing it away with the tiger. Shen Shuwei stopped her greedy thoughts in time. The tigress belonged to Fengwu, how could she take away someone else's pet? After giving up this idea, Shen Shuwei went directly back to the dormitory to sleep without thinking about anything. During the next period of time, Shen Shuwei either ate or slept. The princes still came every day to bring her delicious food, but they all turned her away because they felt unwell. Yuxi took care of it for a few days and was able to walk on the ground. He immediately went to visit Fengwu and brought her favorite stinky tofu. He had someone specially buy the stinky tofu from the palace, and it was still warm. When Yuxi knocked on the palace door, he saw the young eunuch and asked, "Where is Princess Juyu?" After the young eunuch finished the ceremony, he said, "Your Highness, the master is not feeling well, so he has to close the door to thank the guests." During Yuxi's training period, he also heard that Xiaju closed the door to thank guests. He looked at the little eunuch and meant that he couldn't go in either. "Isn't your Highness also missing?" The young eunuch resisted the pressure and replied, "Your Highness, the master has said that no one will be seen." Yuxi had just recovered and should not stand for a long time. He glanced down at the stinky tofu in his hand and handed it to the young eunuch. "Tell Princess Juyu that His Highness will come to visit her again tomorrow." The little eunuch held the stinky tofu in his hands, lowered his head and said, "I obey your orders." After the prince left, the little eunuch closed the palace door, turned around and ran to the bedroom. "Master, the crown prince is here." These were the first words the young eunuch said when he came in. Shen Shuwei didn't want to see anyone now, she just wanted to wait quietly. When she heard that the prince was coming, she asked, "You didn't want him to come in, did you?" The young eunuch shook his head. No, the slave has obeyed the master's instructions." "Isn't it because the master is not afraid of offending the prince?" Shen Chu shrugged his nose slightly and looked at the oil paper bag in the little eunuch's hand. Is that stinky tofu in your hand? The little eunuch didn't react for a while and said huh, looked down at the thing in his hand, and hurriedly sent it to the master. His Royal Highness sent it. Shen Chuwei opened the oil paper bag and saw the stinky tofu, which made her a little greedy. The young eunuch couldn't help but ask again, Master, you thank guests behind closed doors every day, aren't you afraid of offending others? That is His Highness the Crown Prince, the future heir apparent. Shen Chu smiled and said, I'm not rejecting him alone. It's okay. When Ye Yuxi became emperor, she would have run away long ago. Where could she be offended? The little eunuch still didn't understand the reason why his master did this, and he didn't feel comfortable asking. He continued to guard the palace gate with doubts. Shen Chuwei spent most of her time lying on the couch, and didn't want to move after eating every day, unless the tigress kept making trouble outside and she had to come out to comfort it. During this period, Shen Chuwei's face became a little rounder and more fleshy than before. When Xiao Jinyan went to the palace to discredit her, he pinched her face twice and said, it's a bit meaty. The food in the palace is very good. Shen Chuwei thought about the daily meals and praised them without hesitation, it's very good. I eat almost all of the 8 dishes every day. I go to bed after eating and finally put on some meat. Shen Chuwei didn't tell Xiao Jinyan about Ye Suhan beating Ye Yuxi because of her, because she didn't want him to worry. The imperial master hasn't come back for so long. Is it possible that he won't come back? Xiao Jinyan had been waiting outside for too long and had lost his patience. He couldn't let Xiao Ju stay in the palace all the time, and that night Suhan always made him worried. Shen Chu said slightly, but the emperor said that he has written to the imperial preceptor and will definitely come back. He should have no reason to lie to me. Maybe the mountain where the imperial preceptor is staying is far away and it will take some time. Maybe Xiao Jinyan has long regretted letting her enter the palace. It would be better to go directly to find the imperial master. But now that she has waited for so long, she will definitely not be willing to give up. Did that Ye Suhan come to see you? Shen Chu said softly, I am now thanking guests behind closed doors. The palace gate is closed every day, and Ye Suhan has not been here for a few days. Xiao Jinyan was a little surprised when he heard this. You are very brave. You dare to do this even in the palace. Shen Chu held his arm slightly and continued, Jinyan, I don't think Feng Wu is the emperor's daughter. Xiao Jinyan asked, how do you know? Don't look at it. I only know how to eat and drink. I still know what to observe. Xiao Jinyan thought of Ye Suhan and frowned even more, then Ye Suhan's attitude towards you will make sense. Shen Chuwei added, I also found that the emperor's attitude towards Feng Wu is also very different. Xiao Jinyan asked, what's the difference? It feels different. She is an ordinary princess, and the emperor's attitude towards her is so good. Yes, the emperor's attitude towards her was really good, and she could feel her father's love, even though she had not had a father since she was a child. Xiao Jinyan also nodded in agreement with her words. Indeed, it is unbelievable that a princess who is not the emperor's daughter still has a title and lives in such a big palace. So, they don't have any objections to me thanking guests behind closed doors. It seems a bit arrogant. Xiao Jinyan smiled. Xiao Ju was indeed a little clever. Have I ever told you that the nobles and common people in the capital city don't know Feng Wu, nor have they heard of the name of Princess Zhu? I think I have. Shen Chuwei suddenly opened her eyes wide. How strange, why don't they know? I have been to many places these days, and whenever I asked about Princess Zhu, I didn't know. I am also curious why. Did Princess Zhu not make it public when she was named a princess? No, a princess with a title is much more noble than a princess without a title. How could it not be made public? Then I don't understand. Shen Chuwei yawned. Jinyan, let's go to sleep, I'm so sleepy. Xiao Jinyan also knew that these doubts were temporarily unresolved, so he didn't think about those things. Okay. Shen Shuwei hugged Xiao Jinyan's arm and pressed against him. The autumn night was a little cold. Xiao Jinyan turned sideways, followed by the weak light, staring at Xiao Ju for a long time, until Shen Shuwei felt a little embarrassed. Don't you want to sleep? Xiao Jinyan said, I have had the same dream for the past 2 days. Shen Shuwei was interested. What dream? In the dream, there was a little girl who looked like you, chasing me from behind. Shen Shuwei narrowed her eyes and snorted twice. You didn't dream about Fengwu, did you? You should have known her when you were in Nanzhao Kingdom, and you had a good relationship with her. Xiao Jinyan wanted to say something, but when he saw her disappear, he woke up from the dream uncomfortably. Just looking at Xiaoju's reaction, if he continued to talk, he was afraid that he would misunderstand. He stretched out his arms and hugged her in his arms. Go to sleep. Shen Shuwei snorted, you are perfunctory to me. I think it was you in the dream, Xiao Jinyan said, and then he lowered his head and kissed her lips. Shen Shuwei felt that Xiao Jinyan was getting worse and worse, and she began to suspect whether he had secretly recovered his memory. In autumn, one day was colder than the other. Shen Shuwei curled up in the quilt and slept late, and was awakened by the anxious voice of the little palace maid. What's the matter? So urgent. Master, the third prince is here. Oh, I said I won't see anyone. Shen Shuwei closed her eyes and continued to sleep. Less than 2 seconds later, she suddenly opened her eyes. You mean the third prince? The little maid nodded vigorously. The third prince said he must see you, otherwise he would come in by himself. Shen Shuwei came out of the bed helplessly when she thought of the crazy Yesuhan who kept his word. Tell him to wait in the side hall. The little maid responded and ran out. Shen Shuwei began to put on her clothes, but she felt very guilty. She never felt how righteous she was, but when she thought of Yesuhan being punished, Ye Yuchen asked her to beg for mercy and tell the truth. She was always uneasy when she didn't agree. But between Xiao Jinyan and Yesuhan, she would of course choose Xiao Jinyan without hesitation. After washing up, Shen Shuwei came to the side hall anxiously, and saw a thin and slender figure standing in the hall, looking up at the portrait. She took a curious look and was stunned when she saw the person in the portrait. There is one more. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 572. It has been a while since I came to Sansu Palace. Although I spent very little time in the side hall, I have never paid attention to the furnishings inside. This painting is also included. The portrait on the wall is of a girl, about 7 or 8 years old. It looks very much like her when she was 10 years old, but I don't know who painted this painting. Her sketches are not more comparable. So I can only say it looks very similar. If the guess is correct, it should be Fengwu. There is no one else besides her. Yesuhan heard the footsteps and turned around. Seeing that she was also looking at the portrait, he asked, does it look like it? Shen Shuwei heard the sound and looked away to look at Yesuhan. He was still wearing the silver mask, and he couldn't tell whether his face looked good or not. But whether it looks good or not, what does it have to do with her? Are you here for anything? After not seeing each other for so many days, Yesuhan was naturally a little disappointed when he heard such words. Of course I'm here to make you fulfill your promise. Shen Shuwei looked at Yesuhan with doubts in her eyes. After thinking for a long time, she didn't expect that she had any promise to Yesuhan. What promise? I don't seem to have promised anything to you, right? Yesuhan was not only disappointed, but also a little unhappy. You said that if I let the prince go, you would make me mung bean ice cream. Have you forgotten? Shen Shu blinked his beautiful big eyes twice, and his mind was racing with memories. It seemed like he had said that night. Are you here just for mung bean ice cream? Yesuhan asked. What else? Shen Shu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Okay then, I'll have someone prepare the materials and we'll do it right away. However, the production process will be a bit complicated and it will take some time. How about you go back first and I'll have someone deliver it to you after I've finished it? How about it? Yesuhan shook his head. No, I'll wait here. Shen Shuwei, okay. Shen Shuwei asked the little palace maid to prepare ingredients, mung beans, milk, sugar. During the production, Yesuhan was watching from the side. While Shen Shuwei was grinding mung beans, he glanced at Yesuhan beside him and admired his patience. He could watch and wait for such a long production process. Third Prince, can I ask you a question? Yesuhan asked, what's the problem? You and I are childhood sweethearts who grew up together, right? Right. Shen Shuwei continued to ask, then what is my relationship with the emperor? Yesuhan, my father has watched you grow up, and it is true that he is good to you, but... Shen Shuwei asked curiously, but what? Yesuhan stared at Xiaju for a long time. Seeing that she was so curious, he didn't give in. He has always treated you as his daughter-in-law. Shen Shuwei opened his eyes slightly, as a daughter-in-law. Yesuhan nodded, well, no matter which prince you marry, the position of crown princess belongs to you. Otherwise, do you think so many princes are surrounding you? Is it because they really like you? Even the prince is the prince. Yayuxi is also hanging around you, just to make the prince's position more stable. Shen Chu was slightly shocked and couldn't say a word for a long time. Crown princess? Whoever you marry is a princess. So when I first came back, so many princes came to visit me every day, all for a purpose. Feng Wu will not change as the crown princess, so the person who marries her must be the crown prince. Why? Yesuhan looked at her with a half smile, want to know? Shen Chu nodded slightly. She was now very curious about Feng Wu's identity. If she had no identity background, how could she be named a princess? Still a titled princess. The person who marries her must be the prince, which also shows that Feng Wu's identity is not simple. Yesuhan raised the corners of his lips, kiss me and I'll tell you. Shen Shuwei couldn't help rolling his eyes when he heard this, you pretend I didn't ask. After saying that, he ignored Yesuhan and continued making ice cream with his head down. Yesuhan lowered his eyes and looked at her without even blinking. Shen Shuwei was stared at by a pair of fiery eyes and felt uncomfortable all over, so she could only ignore him as much as possible. The production process is actually simple, but the process is a bit long until it is finished. With a mold, it is easier to make. Shen Shuwei held up 20 pieces of mung bean ice cream and showed it to Yesuhan, okay, put it in the ice cellar and eat it once it's frozen. Yesuhan lowered his eyes and asked, how long will it take? Shen Shuwei didn't know whether the freezing speed of the ice cellar was as fast as that of the refrigerator. He made a guess at the time, it will take more than 2 hours, it may take longer. Yesuhan ordered, someone, send these into the ice cellar. Before he finished speaking, the personal guard walked in, took the tray from Shen Shuwei's hand, and then exited. Shen Shuwei wiped his hands with a handkerchief and glanced at Yesuhan standing in front of him. Wouldn't he want to wait here forever? Third Prince, how many hours do you want to wait here? He was asking on the surface, but he was shouting crazily in his heart, begging you to go back and wait. Yesuhan seemed to understand her thoughts and didn't force her to stay or anything else. Wait, send it to my palace. Shen Chu smiled slightly, no problem. Yesuhan stared at her for a long time, looking at the smile on her lips, wishing that he would leave immediately. The corners of Shen Chu's smiling mouth were a little sour, but Yesuhan still refused to leave. Is there anything else wrong, Third Prince? Yesuhan looked at her intently, why do you like Xiao Jinyan? Shen Shuwei answered readily, he is handsome. Yesuhan. There are countless handsome men in this world. You just like him because he is handsome. But I am not bad either. Shen Shuwei looked at the silver mask on Yesuhan's cheek and said with a smile, then take off the mask and let me see if it is good. Yesuhan also smiled and asked, if you take it off, will you like me? Shen Shuwei replied with two words very straightforwardly, no. Yesuhan's voice suddenly became cold, then what's the point of seeing it? Wang Po sells melons and brags about herself. Shen Shuwei snorted, turned around and walked into the bedroom. Yesuhan. If Yesuhan doesn't leave, she can leave, right? When she wakes up from sleep, she can eat mung bean ice cream. Before going to bed, Shen Shuwei asked the little palace maid to bring a stick of incense to light it. The little palace maid was very fast, and when she came back, she had an extra stick of incense in her hand. Master, what do you want the incense for? Shen Shuwei took the incense and said seriously, pray to the gods. The little maid had a question mark on her forehead, why pray to the gods? You don't understand. Shen Shuwei closed her eyes. As the saying goes, sincerity is the key to success. It was rare for her to make such a sincere wish. The passing gods, I sincerely wish here, and ask the master to come back soon. The little maid looked at the pious face of the master, and suddenly realized that the master was asking for marriage. There were so many princes around every day, and the princes were all handsome and rich. She didn't know which one to choose, so she begged the gods for help. After making a wish, Shen Shuwei handed the incense to the little maid, and then began to take off her clothes and go to bed. The little maid lit the incense in her hand and reminded seriously, Master, you have to go to the Yulao temple to pray for marriage. The gods passing by don't care. Originally, the little maid was a submissive person, and she was afraid that if she didn't serve well, her head would be moved. After spending some time with Shen Shuwei, she has become much bolder, more lively, and even learned to speak a little. Shen Shuwei paused while taking off her clothes, who said I asked for a marriage. She didn't seem to have revealed the idea of asking for a marriage, right? The little maid asked with a puzzled look, then what does the master ask for if not a marriage? Has she decided who to marry? The prince. If she chooses the prince, the master will be the prince's consort in the future. Is the little maid so worried? You are still young and don't understand. Shen Shuwei patted her shoulder, then went to bed, closed her eyes and began to sleep. The little maid looked at the master, still with a puzzled look on her face. The master didn't seem to be older than her. Asterisk. As soon as Yesuhan walked out of Wuyu Palace, he saw Ye Yuchen coming towards him. Third brother, I knew you were here to find Xiaju. Ye Yuchen strode over and looked at Yesuhan worriedly. Yesuhan asked calmly, why are you here? Ye Yuchen said helplessly, of course I came to see you. You can't wait until your wounds are healed before coming to see Xiaju. You can't run away. Yesuhan was just released from the confinement teacher yesterday. There was no good part on his body. Even if his martial arts skills were high, he couldn't stand 3 days of whipping. The wound was so deep that the bone was visible, and the whip used was also problematic. No need to guess, you know someone is deliberately playing tricks behind the scenes. The purpose is to kill Yesuhan. Yesuhan laughed softly, it's too late. Ye Yuchen asked, what's too late? Yesuhan didn't explain and continued to walk forward. Ye Yuchen caught up with him, third brother, heal your wounds first. After returning to the bedroom, Ye Yuchen came in and ordered, bring the medicine box. The guard went to get the medicine box neatly. Yesuhan sat down on the couch, picked up the teacup and handed it to his lips and took 2 sips of tea. Ye Yuchen strode over and saw him drinking tea leisurely. He really didn't care about his injuries at all. The guards quickly brought the medicine box and the medicine prepared by the imperial physician. Ye Yuchen said impatiently, don't drink it, take off your clothes, I will change the medicine for you. Why are you like an old nanny? Yesuhan said with disdain, but still put down the teacup in his hand, and put his hands to his waist to untie the waist belt. "Why am I like an old nanny? Don't you know what's going on? If you were like me, I wouldn't have to worry about this," Yayuchin said as he opened the medicine box. "Third brother, if the prince hadn't asked the ministers to impeach you behind your back, you wouldn't have to stay in prison for a few more days and suffer more. It's better to deal with Yayuxi as soon as possible, otherwise he might do something behind your back." Yasuhan's eyes were cold. "He bullied Xiaju, I will naturally not let him go." Yayuchin still understood Yayuxi a little bit. He coveted the position of the prince a long time ago. How sincere can he be to Xiaju? Yayuxi is quite courageous. He dared to bully Xiaju under the pretext of drinking. He deserves to be beaten. After complaining about Yayuxi, he began to criticize Yasuhan again. "You too, if you teach him a lesson on the surface, the emperor will at most say a few words to you. After that, we will teach him a lesson in secret, and we will not suffer any loss." Yasuhan threw him 3 words, "I can't stand it." Yayuchin had already guessed that he would say this, otherwise he would not have beaten the prince to death. "You have been away for so many years. Although your connections are not as good as before, there are many ministers who support you. Take back the position of the prince first." Yasuhan was silent for a long time before he uttered a sentence. "If it weren't for her, what would I need this throne for?" Yayuchin paused in applying the medicine and looked at Yasuhan in confusion. "Third brother, what do you mean by this?" No matter how Yayuchin asked, Yasuhan never spoke. Faced with Yasuhan's temper, Yayuchin thought that he would be depressed one day. Asterisk. When Shen Shuwei woke up, it was lunchtime. After lunch, she ordered the eunuch to go to the ice cellar to check if the mung bean ice cream was frozen. The eunuch took the order and went to the ice cellar to check. Shen Shuwei waited for a long time, but the eunuch did not come back. She was greedy and could not help asking the little maid beside her, "Why hasn't he come back yet?" The little maid replied, "Master, the ice cellar is far away from Wu Palace, and he can't come back for a while." Shen Shuwei only realized at this time that the palace was very large, and the ice cellar must be far away, so she could only wait slowly. But the greedy bug in her stomach was grumbling and didn't want to wait. Just when Shen Shuwei was looking forward to it, the eunuch came back trotting, holding the tray that was sent in the morning. "Master, it's frozen," the eunuch shouted excitedly as he ran all the way. Shen Shuwei hadn't eaten mung bean ice cream for a long time. She was almost craving for it. She waved to the eunuch impatiently, "Open it quickly, I want to try it." "Yes, master." The eunuch held the tray in front of Shen Shuwei with both hands. Shen Shuwei took it and looked at it for a while before taking a bite. It was cold, with a milky aroma of mung beans and moderate sweetness. It was delicious. The little palace maid and the eunuch had never seen mung bean ice cream before. Seeing their master eating it with relish, they were a little greedy. Shen Shuwei took 2 bites in a row. Seeing their greedy look, they had been serving her closely during the time she came to Wu Palace. They worked hard, and she was also a person who clearly distinguished rewards and punishments. "You can try it too." The little palace maid and the eunuch looked at each other with unbelievable eyes. "Master, can we eat it too?" Shen Chu smiled and said, "It's okay, eat it. After you finish eating, you can make more." "Thank you for the reward, master." The little palace maid and the little eunuch happily took one each. When they put it in their mouths, their eyes lit up. It was cold and refreshing, and the taste was good. "By the way, send it to the third prince." Shen Shuwei thought about it and raised 3 fingers, "Send 3 to him to try, it should be enough. Tell him that eating too much is not good for the stomach." You know, the little eunuch smiled, prepared 3, and went to the palace of the third prince. Shen Shuwei suddenly thought of the emperor. After entering the palace, the emperor treated her really well. "You go and send 1 to the emperor." Okay, the little palace maid prepared one and went to the imperial study happily. Shen Shuwei finished eating too, and the depressed mood of the past few days disappeared instantly. Looking at the 12 mung bean ice creams in front of her, she picked up another one and walked out of the side hall with a cheerful step while eating. As soon as I came out, I heard the tiger lion beasts cry, "Awoo!" Shen Shuwei walked over with doubts and saw a tall and slender man standing next to the tiger lion beast. The man's black hair cascaded down like silk, and his blue and white long sleeves fluttered without wind, showing a bit of fairy spirit. Looking at the man's side face, his eyebrows and eyes were as delicate as a painting, his high nose bridge, and his lips were also very beautiful. Just a side face made Shen Shuwei stunned. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 573. Chapter 573, Can you control her just because she is handsome? A tone of voice like a father. After being stunned for several seconds, Shen Shuwei took a bite of mung bean ice cream to calm down, and then stared at the man for a few more times to make sure that she was not seeing things in broad daylight. He was indeed a super handsome man. She stepped onto the arch bridge with curiosity and walked towards the slender figure. The tiger lion beast excitedly wagged its tail. When it saw Xiaju coming, it turned its head and howled excitedly twice, "Awoo!" Then, as usual, it ran over with its tail wagging. Shen Shuwei was eating mung bean ice cream. When the tiger lion beast came, she just rubbed its huge head twice perfunctorily, but her eyes were always looking at the man in front of her. When the tiger lion beast ran over, the man also turned around and looked over, and at the same time, she saw the front of the man. The man's facial features were delicate and three-dimensional, and his eyes were cold and a little indifferent. The blue and white clothes on his body were very elegant, and there was a green waist belt around his waist. A closer look revealed that it was in the shape of an orchid, with slender leaves wrapping around his thin waist. The clothes were a little empty, which was enough to show that there was no fat on his waist. Shen Shuwei was obsessed with looks, and she couldn't help but look at the handsome man with super high looks a few more times. She felt that the man in front of her was more handsome than Xiao Jinyan, probably because of his incomparable temperament. Thinking of the fact that there were always princes coming to see her these days, could it be that the man in front of her was also a prince? Are you a prince? While Shen Shuwei was looking at him, Jun Mocking was also looking at her. His eyebrows and eyes were very similar to those when he was a child, and they did not change because of growing up. His eyebrows and eyes were slightly curved, and his bright eyes always contained a faint smile. He glanced at the things in her hand. After so many years, she still had food in her hands wherever she went. Why do you ask that? Jun Mocking's voice was like the gurgling spring water in the mountain stream, and it was clear and crisp like pearls falling on a jade plate, without losing the calmness that an adult man should have. Shen Shuwei found that the man's voice was also very pleasant. His appearance and temperament were proportional to his voice, and there was nothing wrong with it. She took 2 steps forward and closed the distance between them. As soon as she approached, she felt a faint cold breath, which made people awed. Many princes have come to Wu Palace during this period. If you are not a prince, are you a minister? But ministers cannot enter and leave the palace at will. Shen Shuwei raised her head and stared at the handsome man in front of her. There was no way. The man in front of her was as tall as Xiao Jinyan, and might be 1 or 2 centimeters taller. If she didn't look up, she might only see his chin. The powerful momentum that cannot be ignored, could it be the legendary regent? Does Nanzao have a regent? If I had known that I would enter the palace, I should have sorted out the relationships between all important and powerful people, otherwise it would be difficult to guess the identity of the other party. The neglected tiger-lion beast raised its huge head and rubbed Xiaoju's arm. Jun Mocking lowered his eyes and glanced at the tiger-lion beast. The tiger-lion beast felt the cold gaze from Jun Mocking, and immediately shrank his neck and moved behind Xiaoju. Shen Chuwei looked at the tiger-lion beast's behavior, because the tiger-lion beast had a fear reaction to a stranger for the first time. She looked at the man in front of her in confusion. At first glance, he was a powerful person and could not afford to offend him. She was now in a closed-door state. If others knew about it, wouldn't it be obviously misunderstood? And Yesuhan refused to leave. It seemed that if the princes came again tomorrow, she would not even have a reason to refuse. Jun Mocking's voice was clear, girls should eat less cold food. Shen Chuwei had just taken a bite of the mung bean ice cream when she was inexplicably scolded. The cold ice cream stayed in her mouth, and she couldn't swallow it or spit it out. It took several seconds to react. It was just a stranger who was meddling in other people's business. She ate the ice cream in her mouth. Do you know why my grandfather can live to be 99 years old? Jun Mocking, have you seen your grandfather? How do you know he lived to be 99 years old? Shen Chuwei was stunned for a moment when she heard the words. Why didn't the man in front of her play by the rules? Normal people would ask back, why? Xiao Jinyan is so smart and just asks obediently, why? She raised her chin, of course I have seen him, don't I know my own grandfather? Thinking, you don't know if I have a grandfather, and you won't know if I make it up. Stop talking nonsense, make a cup of tea. After Jun Mocking finished speaking, he stepped onto the arch bridge. Shen Chuwei was petrified on the spot when she heard the words. This was the first time she met someone who didn't play by the rules. It's okay to be self-righteous, but he also ordered her to do things. Where did this person come from? Like a master. Although Shen Chuwei was a little dissatisfied, the guest was a guest, but this guest was a little bit hostile and not restrained at all. She looked at the mung bean ice cream in her hand, took a big bite, and then went to make tea. Asterisk. The eunuch carried 3 mung bean ice creams and walked quickly to the residence of the third prince, fearing that the mung bean ice cream would melt due to the heat on the road. He walked in under the guidance of the guard. Yesuhan had just woken up from his nap when the guard came in to report. Master, Princess Juyo sent someone to deliver something. Yesuhan guessed what it was when he heard it. He slowly put on his clothes and said lightly, let him in. The guard responded and left. After a while, the eunuch walked in with his body bent and greeted him. Third prince, this is what my master ordered me to deliver. Yesuhan looked up at the tray in the eunuch's hand, bring it here. Here the eunuch bowed and stepped forward, raising his hands in front of the third prince. Yesuhan looked at the mung bean ice cream, his slender fingers reached into the plate, picked it up and looked at it for several times, and when he had looked enough, he put it into his mouth and took a bite. It was cold at the entrance, and then he tasted the taste of mung beans, followed by the aroma of milk. It tasted good. He glanced at the plate and saw that there were still 2 mung bean ice creams left. He asked, she prepared so many, why did she only send 3? Replying to the third prince, the master said that eating too much mung bean ice cream would cause stomach problems. The eunuch replied. Yesuhan chuckled, she really knows how to find excuses. The eunuch smiled awkwardly. Yesuhan said, go back and tell her that it tastes good. I will convey it to you. I'm leaving. The eunuch withdrew. The little palace maid also hurried to the imperial study, also worried that the ice cream would melt. When eunuch Xian came to report, the emperor was busy and exhausted. In normal times, eunuch Xian would directly block him to avoid making the emperor more annoyed. However, the one coming from Wu Palace was naturally a little different. Your Majesty, Princess Juyo sent someone to deliver desserts, and wanted you to taste them. Eunuch Xian said carefully. Yahouding heard that Princess Juyo had sent desserts, so he put down the memorial in his hand and looked up at eunuch Xian. I was worried, so Xiaju sent someone to deliver desserts. Yes, eunuch Xian turned around and let the little palace maid in. The little palace maid bowed and came in, not even daring to raise her head, and took small steps forward to salute. Eunuch Xian took the dessert from the little palace maid, slowly handed it to the emperor, and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, this dessert is very exquisite, I haven't seen it yet." Yahouding's eyes fell on the dessert in eunuch Xian's hand. After looking at it for a few times, he smiled and said, "This is the first time I have seen dessert with a bamboo stick. I will try it. Xiaoju will not let me down." Eunuch Xian raised his hands forward again and said with a smile, "Princess Juyu always loves to eat. The dessert she chose must be right." That makes sense. Yahouding picked up the bamboo sticks on the plate with anticipation, and was about to eat it with the bamboo sticks. As a result, he picked up the mung bean ice cream, and a smile flashed in his eyes. This dessert can actually be picked up. Yahouding smiled and put the mung bean ice cream into his mouth and took a bite. It was cold in the mouth, as if he tasted the taste of mung beans, a little sweet, with a milky flavor. The coolness went into his stomach, as if it drove away the irritability just now. Yahouding took another bite and found that it tasted good. He stared at the dessert in front of him and said, "Xiaoju said that when you are in a bad mood, eating some dessert will make you feel better. This is true." Eunuch Xian smiled and said, "It seems that the emperor likes this dessert very much." Yahouding nodded, "Well, it tastes good." Eunuch Xian said, "Princess Juyo still understands the emperor and knows the emperor's taste." After eating, Yahouding was still unsatisfied and looked up at the little palace maid below. "Why is there only one?" The little palace maid was stunned for a moment when she heard the words, and thought of what the master had just said, and replied, "Your Majesty, Princess Juyo said that eating too much is not good for the stomach, it is better to eat less." Yahouding was even more happy when he heard the words, "So that's it, Xiaoju is thoughtful, you can go back." Yes, the little palace maid kowtowed and got up and left the imperial study. Yahouding was no longer as irritable as before, but rather calm. "Although Xiaoju is not my daughter, she cares about me more than them. She knows to bring me food when she goes out to play, and she never forgets to send me a taste of delicious food." Eunuch Xian watched Princess Juyu grow up. Princess Juyu has been cute and sensible since she was a child. She is polite and the key is that her mouth is really sweet. Princess Juyu has been very sensible since she was a child. I like her very much. Yahouding smiled and said, "She hasn't changed when she grew up, but I don't know which of my sons will be lucky enough to marry Xiaju." Eunuch Xian said, "Your Majesty, no matter which prince marries Princess Juyu, she will be your daughter-in-law." Yahouding laughed heartily when he heard it. "That makes sense." Asterisk. After Shen Chuwei brewed the tea, she walked into the side hall and saw a handsome man sitting on the couch. He sat leisurely and his noble temperament could not be described. I don't know if it was her illusion, but I always felt that there was fairy air around the man, like someone who walked out of a painting, with the appearance and temperament of a fairy. Shen Chuwei shook her head. Now was not the time to admire handsome men, but how to drive this arrogant man out of Wuyu Palace. She brought the new tea to the couch and placed it in front of him. After placing it, she sat down on the other side. June Mocking picked up the teacup and looked up at her. "How have you been these years?" Shen Chuwei subconsciously replied, "Not bad." After answering, she reacted and looked at the man in front of her in confusion. After thinking about it, she realized that this person knew her, so he asked such a question, because she had heard similar questions from Bulletin Chien during this period. Shen Chuwei stared at the man for a long time. He looked so good when drinking tea, I found that I had been looking at him for a long time. What if he misunderstood that she liked him? If Xiao Jinyan knew, he would definitely be jealous. His eyes turned around and looked at the mung bean ice cream. There were still 12. Although he had eaten 3, it was nothing to eat another one. Shen Shuwei was always polite when it came to her own things, so she reached out and picked one up. She glanced at the man opposite her and thought, since guests are guests after all, it would be better for her to say a few polite words. Do you want to eat mung bean ice cream? June mocking, no. Shen Shuwei was waiting for the sentence, and said with a smile, if you don't want to eat it, then I will eat it. As she said that, she put it in her mouth. It happened that the little palace maid came back and saw that the master took another piece of mung bean ice cream. She hurriedly reminded her. Master, didn't you say that eating too much ice cream is bad for the stomach? Why do you eat so much yourself? Shen Shuwei is a doctor, so she naturally understands, but she can't resist the craving. It's okay, I'll eat less tomorrow. The little palace maid was a little worried, but if the stomach is hurt, it's not easy to heal. Shen Shuwei thought of Chengzi when she saw the little palace maid's earnest words, and suddenly missed her a little, but she still had to eat the mung bean ice cream. Don't worry. Shen Shuwei ignored the little palace maid after she finished speaking, raised the mung bean ice cream in her hand, and when she was about to bite it, the ice cream in her hand disappeared. She watched the ice cream pause in the air, then whoosh, flew to the plate, and was neatly arranged with the remaining 11 mung bean ice creams. Then she looked at June mocking, who was as steady as a mountain, drinking tea leisurely, as if he had not done what happened just now. Shen Shuwei didn't believe it, she had clearly seen the man take action just now, although it was not obvious. You did it, right, she used a positive tone, just not allowing him to deny it. June mocking said lightly. Although you are a guest, you can't prevent me from eating, I didn't provoke you. Shen Shuwei tried not to get angry, but her hand had already reached into the plate and picked up the mung bean ice cream she had just grabbed. When she wanted to pick it up, she found that there was a strong force pressing her hand, making her unable to move. Hey! She used all her strength, even the strength of sucking milk, but still couldn't pick up a small mung bean ice cream. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at the man opposite. Without asking, she knew that he was the one who did it. She couldn't help asking, are you here to pick a fight? June mocking was as clear and indifferent as ever, no matter what you eat in moderation. Shen Shuwei had never seen such a nosy stranger. Oh, no, it was the man who thought he knew Feng Wu and was in charge of everything. Xiao Jinyan controlled her, but why did he control her? Why? Shen Shuwei said angrily, of course I know I should eat in moderation. Can't I eat another piece? I won't eat after eating one piece. June mocking put down the teacup in his hand and raised his beautiful eyes, do you believe what you said? Young master is asking for monthly tickets online. Good night. Babies, please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 574. Chapter 574. It's not a good boy to lie, the national master is so young. Shen Shuwei paused after hearing the words and lowered his eyes to look at the mung bean ice cream in front of him. With his determination, he would definitely not be satisfied with just one. It's only afternoon now, why don't you have to eat 2 or 3? Wait, why should she listen to someone she doesn't know? Xiao Jinyan usually talks about the right amount. He is afraid that she will have a toothache or that she will accumulate food. Of course I believe it, so don't meddle in other people's business. June mocking said, lying is not a good boy. Shen Chu raised his chin slightly, that's none of your business. June mocking. Shen Shuwei added, you may not know that people who worry tend to age easily and get wrinkles. You are still young now, so you still have to learn from me. You don't care about anything. You are much younger than your peers. The love of beauty does not distinguish between men and women. A handsome man like the one in front of you will definitely care about his appearance and be afraid of getting wrinkles. After hearing this, he will probably not dare to meddle in his own business. June Mocking's voice was as cold as frost. Are you done? Shen Shuwei looked at the handsome man with a puzzled look on his face. It's done. I'm going to take a shower. June Mocking's body was somewhat stained with dust and sweat during the journey, and she would feel uncomfortable if she didn't take a shower. Shen Shuwei was hoping that he would leave quickly so as not to prevent her from eating mung bean ice cream. Okay. When June Mocking stood up, Shen Shuwei also stood up and walked him out of the door. He smiled and waved his hand. Handsome man, go slowly. I won't see him off. June Mocking stared at Xiaoju for a while, then withdrew his gaze and walked out. When Shen Shuwei saw someone leaving, she ran in without looking back. When she saw the mung bean ice cream that she was longing for, she sat down on the couch and reached out to get the mung bean ice cream, but found it empty. When she looked sideways, she was completely confused. All right. The 12 mung bean ice creams that were originally arranged neatly were not even on the plate. She looked around and found that the mung bean ice cream was really missing. There was a big question mark written on Shen Shuwei's forehead. He had clearly seen it on the table just now, but why did it suddenly disappear? She suddenly thought of that handsome man. No need to guess, he must be the one responsible. Shen Shuwei chased him out without thinking. He glanced at the place within sight and did not see the immortal figure of the man. After such a short time, it was impossible to leave the Sansu Palace. She turned to ask the little palace maid beside her, which way did that man go just now? The little palace maid replied, back to the princess, I saw the young master going to the main hall. Main hall? What was he doing in the main hall? Shen Shuwei went to the main hall with doubts. The little palace maid followed behind with small steps. The main hall is opposite, about 20 meters away. When he reached the entrance of the main hall, Shen Chu slightly raised his head and looked around a few times, then asked the little palace maid behind him uncertainly. Are you sure that man entered the main hall? My servant saw that young master entering the main hall with my own eyes, the little palace maid answered firmly. When Shen Shuwei thought that the 12 mung bean ice creams were gone, she felt heartbroken. No matter what, she wanted an explanation. Knock on the door. The little palace maid took the order and knocked on the door. After a while, the door opened. The person who opened the door was a handsome man, wearing a white long-sleeved gown, clean and refreshing. It's just that expressionless face, without any affinity. Shuai asked, is there something wrong with Princess Juyu? Shen Shuwei glanced inside, but naturally she couldn't see anything. She looked at the man in front of her again. She was also very unfamiliar, but she could guess that he was the follower of the handsome and innocent man just now. I'm here to see your master. Shuai said, my master is taking a bath. Shen Chu said slightly, I can go in and wait. Okay. Shuai didn't stop him, opened the door and let her in. Shen Shuwei held up her skirt and crossed the threshold and walked in. This was the first time she entered the main hall after having been in Wushao Palace for so long. The design and decoration inside were no different from those in the side hall. The only difference was that it was probably a little bigger. Shen Shuwei followed Shuai to the side hall of the main hall to wait. There was no one in the main hall, and it was even emptier than her place. Shuai brought a new cup of tea and placed it in front of her, then withdrew. Where does Shen Shuwei have time to drink tea? All she was thinking about was mung bean ice cream. 12 of them were equivalent to a huge sum of money. After waiting for a long time, Shen Chu finally looked around and saw the man coming. He was still wearing a blue and white gown, and there seemed to be no change before and after the bath. June Mocking was not surprised to see her, more like it was expected. Shen Shuwei stood up, watched the man pass by, and then sat on the couch. She asked, did you hide my mung bean ice cream? June Mocking said in a light voice, yes. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but feel a little angry when she saw him looking confident and calm. Why do you hide my mung bean ice cream? Shuihui brought a new cup of tea and placed it in front of his master, then retreated. Jun Mocking picked up the teacup and glanced at Xiaoju, who was fuming. This is the only way to deal with lying children. Shen Shuwei was angry and aggrieved. The mung bean ice cream is mine, not yours. What right do you have to hide my things? The little palace maid held her master's hand, leaned close to her ear and whispered in her ear, Master, don't be angry. We don't know his background yet. If he is a big shot, it will be bad if he offends him. In fact, without the little palace maid reminding her, Shen Shuwei also knew that the identity of the man in front of her was not simple, and he was also a very powerful person. She just didn't understand, how could a grown man live in the same palace with a princess? It was too strange. If it weren't for the 12 mung bean ice creams, she wouldn't have been so unwilling to ask for an explanation. But for the sake of 12 mung bean ice creams, it was really not worth it to offend someone who shouldn't be offended. At worst, I'll spend some time to make it again tomorrow. Shen Shuwei gritted her teeth. Forget it, the 12 mung beans are given to you, I have something to go back first. Shen Shuwei said and slipped away without looking back, mainly because she felt guilty. As soon as she left the main hall, Shen Shuwei ordered, go and ask what powerful people have come to the palace, and then ask who lived in the main hall before. The little palace maid replied, I know. Shen Shuwei returned to the bedroom, still feeling a little depressed, until she saw the braised pork elbow on the table at dinner. She was relieved a little. The little maid ran back to report, Master, I have been asking around for a long time, but I haven't heard of any powerful figures coming to the palace. Shen Shuwei took a bite of the braised pork elbow, her eyes full of doubts. The man didn't look like a prince, and the prince couldn't live with the princess. As for who lived in the main hall before, I asked many people and they all said they didn't know. Later, I asked an elderly person, and she said that it seemed that the national master lived there before. Shen Shuwei had just taken a sip of the broth, and when she heard the national master, she almost spit it out. She took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth. You mean the national master? I don't know either. Most of the people in the palace are new and don't know about the Wu Palace. I finally found an old man to ask. Maybe it's true, the little maid said. No way. Is that man the national master? But it was quickly denied by Shen Shuwei. The national master is a big shot, and the emperor respects the national master so much. He will definitely welcome him personally and hold a banquet. This is the conclusion based on the information provided by Xiao Jinyan. But there was no news in the palace these 2 days, and the emperor did not say anything about the return of the national master. Moreover, people who can be national masters must be at least 50 or 60 years old, right? The man today looked very young, less than 30 years old. How could he be the national master? Could it be someone around the national master? Thinking of this possibility, Shen Shuwei's eyes lit up. Does that mean that the national master will be back soon? She secretly thanked that she did not continue to make that person angry because of the 12 mung bean ice creams today. Because she was happy, Shen Shuwei had an extra bowl of rice tonight. Before going to bed, Shen Shuwei asked the little palace maid to get a stick of incense. The little palace maid took a stick of incense as quickly as possible and lit it. Shen Shuwei held the incense and prayed devoutly to the gods passing by, hoping that the national master would be able to return to the palace tomorrow. After the master finished praying, the little maid couldn't help but ask with incense, Master, are you praying for marriage this time? Shen Chu smiled and said, Why would I pray for that? I'm going to sleep, you should rest too. The little maid couldn't figure out what the master was thinking, so she didn't think about it anymore and left with incense. The next day, people were coming and going on the busy streets. Brother, you are injured, why do you try so hard to please her? You are the prince now, and she will choose you as long as she is not blind. Early in the morning, Yaenyu followed the prince out to buy things for Fengwu, feeling a little unhappy. Yuxi said, Xiaoju's favorite thing is to eat. If I don't cater to her, someone else will. Besides, Xiaoju has a good relationship with the third brother. If Xiaoju remembers the past, will I still have a chance? Yaenyu felt that what the prince said made sense, but she was dissatisfied with Fengwu being spoiled by everyone. She was the real princess. Her father didn't black her without a title, and he spoiled Fengwu everywhere. If it weren't for the national teacher, Fengwu would be nothing. Yaenyu was indignant in her heart. A figure in the crowd attracted his attention. After a closer look, he found that it was the man he met last time. She had been looking for a long time but couldn't find him. Today, she actually found him. She chased him without thinking, and even forgot to take into account the princess's manners. Sir, please stay. Xiao Jinyan went out these days to collect information and ask if the national teacher had returned to the capital. Suddenly, he was stopped by someone. He looked at the person in front of him in confusion. It was a woman he didn't know. What's up? Yaenyu ignored the other person's cold and distant tone because of her happiness. She smiled and said, You look familiar. Have we met somewhere before? The man in front of her did look familiar, but it didn't matter. The important thing was to keep him, otherwise it would be difficult to see him again next time. Xiao Jinyan didn't want to waste time on someone he didn't know. He said coldly, Sorry, I don't know you. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Yaenyu reached out to stop him again. Wait a minute. Xiao Jinyan asked coldly, Anything else? Yaenyu smiled and said, Your accent doesn't sound like a local. Are you here to do business? There must be many unfamiliar places when you first arrive. If you have any difficulties, you can find me. It is said that those who are attentive without any reason are either treacherous or thieves. The woman in front of her was full of attentiveness. That look was very familiar. She had seen it in Wang Leiwen's eyes. Xiao Jinyan frowned, Thank you very much. I'll leave first. Yaenyu said, You still don't know who I am? If you want to find someone for help, you don't know where to find me. Xiao Jinyan's eyes were already a little impatient. Yuxi came over and asked her sister, What are you doing? Yaenyu raised her head and looked at the prince's brother, and said happily, Brother, I hit it off with this young master and want to make friends. Yuxi raised her eyes to look at the man opposite, and found that he looked familiar just at a glance. What's your name? Xiao Jinyan keenly sensed a hint of hostility in the eyes of the man in front of him. In this unfamiliar metropolis, when he didn't know the identity of the other person, it was better to avoid him. We don't know each other. I'm afraid it's rude for you to ask like this. I'd better leave first. After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he left without looking back. When Yaenyu wanted to catch up, she was stopped by Yuxi. She said with some dissatisfaction, Brother, why did you stop me? Yuxi said, Don't you think he looks like the same person? Yaenyu looked at the prince's brother in confusion, It looks familiar, what's wrong? Yuxi looked at the man who had disappeared into the crowd, I think he looks very similar to Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan, Yaenyu suddenly remembered, is he the prince of Daxia? No wonder he looks familiar. However, how could the prince of Daxia be in Datu City? I think he just looks similar. Yuxi said, I hope so. It's getting late. It's time to go back. Yaenyu was a little reluctant. It was not easy to meet her today, and she still had to leave her contact information. Asterisk. After Shen Chuwei finished his breakfast, he stood at the door and glanced at the main hall opposite. He didn't know if the Imperial Master was back. Why not go and find out the news? With this thought in mind, she held up her skirt and walked down the steps. It was still the handsome guy from yesterday who opened the door. Shen Chu smiled and asked, "Is your master here?" Shui Huai took 2 steps back and said, "Yes, Princess Juyo, please come in." This was the second time Shen Shui entered the main hall. She came to the side hall with familiarity and saw the man from yesterday, sitting on the couch drinking tea, and his sitting posture was so good looking. Especially that face, no matter how many times I see it, I can't help but look at it twice. The subordinates of the national preceptor are indeed different from ordinary people. The imperial preceptor himself must be an old man with an immortal spirit and a goatee. Just as Shen Shui was imagining, a clear voice came into his ears, "Come in." "Well. Found." Shen Shui stood up straight and walked in. The feeling was completely different from what he felt when he walked in yesterday. "Young master, you see, we live in the Sansusai Palace together and are neighbors. I wonder what I call you. It's easy to say hello when we meet in the future, don't you think?" Jun Mocking stopped drinking tea and raised his cold, frosty eyes, "Nothing big or small. Good night, Spicy. Babies, please support me with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 575. The word disrespectful made Shen Shui a little confused. Because disrespectful is usually used by elders and juniors, and high-ranking officials and low-ranking officials can also be scolded with disrespectful. Feng Wu is a princess with a title after all. Even if the man in front of her is the proud disciple or subordinate of the national teacher, he should not be disrespectful to her. This is very impolite. I just returned to the palace not long ago, and I don't recognize everyone in the palace. So, how should I call you? There should be no problem asking this, right? "Master, master, the prince is here." The little maid ran all the way in. When she saw the man, although she didn't know who he was, she still bowed. When Shen Shui heard that the prince was coming, she expected it, but she was a little helpless. Anyway, she went out to deal with it. "I'll go see the prince first and disturb you later." Shen Shui turned and left after saying that. Jun Mocking raised his eyes to look at Xiaoju's back and took a sip of tea thoughtfully. Shen Shui returned to her side hall and saw Ye Yuxi sitting on a chair. He was still a little pale from his serious injury. Ye Yuxi saw her coming, stood up and walked over with a smile. "Xiaju, I heard that you were ill, are you feeling better?" "I was ill," just an excuse Shen Shui found to close the door to visitors. She could eat, drink and sleep. "I'm fine, just a little headache, it's okay." "That's good." Yesuhan picked up the oil paper bag in his hand and said with a smile, "I went out of the palace early this morning and saw the freshly made jujube paste cake and chestnut crisps. I thought you would eat them for the first time, so I bought some and brought them back." Although Shen Shui was very greedy, she thought that the brothers were trying to please her because of some kind of interest relationship, and the purpose was to marry her, no, to marry Feng Wu. How could she enjoy it so comfortably? "You are so badly injured, it is most important to rest at home. I can ask someone to buy these cakes outside the palace." Ye Yuxi smiled and said, "Xiaju is still as considerate as before. I hope Xiaju doesn't take what happened that night to heart." After Ye Yuxi finished speaking, he looked at Xiaju with an apologetic face and expectation. Shen Shui still has some lingering fears when it comes to what happened that night. It's not because of Ye Yuxi, but Yesuhan. It's the first time she met such a person. She nodded perfunctorily, "Yeah." Ye Yuxi was relieved when he saw her nod. He was afraid that she would always reject him and not believe him because of what happened that night. "You have been back for a while. The night view of the capital city is nice. Do you want to go and see it?" Shen Shui's eyes turned and she smiled and refused tactfully, "I have been studying a kind of food these days. I haven't succeeded yet. I don't have time for the time being." The first time was intercepted by Yasuhan, and this time it was rejected by Zyaju, which made Yayuxi a little embarrassed and confused. There were countless daughters of famous families who wanted to go with him, but Zyaju was the first one he took the initiative to ask out, but was rejected. He forced a smile. "You are still so obsessed with food, so how about we ask out when you succeed?" Shen Shuwei did not nod in agreement, but said, "Let's talk about it when you succeed." Yayuxi smiled and said, "Then I hope you succeed soon." Shen Shuwei just smiled. "It's up to her to decide whether you can succeed or not." After sending Yayuxi away, Shen Shuwei thought about the man opposite. In order to find out about the national teacher, she planned to go over and take a look. As soon as she walked out of the side hall, she saw the man standing under the peach tree. Beside him, the tiger lion beast and the snowball rarely played around, but stayed under the tree obediently. Shen Shuwei walked over with curiosity, raised her head and looked at the place where the man was looking. The peach tree didn't bloom in autumn, so there was nothing to see. "What are you looking at?" Jun Mocking lowered his eyes and looked at her. "Come here." Shen Shuwei pointed at herself. "Me?" Jun Mocking nodded. Shen Shuwei came over with doubts, looking up at the man who was much taller than her. "Is there something wrong?" Jun Mocking did not speak, but pressed her shoulders and let her lean against the peach tree. Shen Shuwei instinctively wanted to avoid being touched by a stranger, but as soon as she moved, a cold voice came from above her head, "Don't move." She looked up at the man in front of her with a puzzled look. What on earth did he want to do? He has a cold and expressionless face, and he doesn't look like a lecher. Such a handsome man, as long as he hooks his finger, there will be women coming one after another. There is no need to be a hooligan. They were too close to each other, so close that they could smell the cold breath on each other. She couldn't help asking, "What do you want to do?" Jun Mocking's eyes fell on the small knife wound on the peach tree, which was left when she was 9 years old. "It's been almost 10 years, you've grown a lot." Shen Shuwei turned her head and looked at the peach tree behind her. After a little search, she saw a mark on the trunk. Without asking, she knew it was left before Fengwu disappeared. She said guiltily, "Of course, she has grown a lot in 10 years. Jun Mocking looked at her height and concluded, "A little shorter." Shen Shuwei. "I know that I am not tall, but I am not short either." 163 centimeters, which was not considered short in ancient times. Jun Mocking said again, "But it's good this way." Shen Shuwei. "Can you finish the words at once?" If it were someone else, they would not be able to put away the knife. After looking at her height, Jun Mocking began to look at her appearance. The small face as big as a palm became more delicate after losing the baby fat. Now his eyebrows and eyes are more like hers. Shen Shuwei didn't bother about the height issue, as long as it didn't hinder her from eating. Although she had just met the man yesterday and had only met him 4 times today, she felt that he seemed to be a good person except for his cold and expressionless face. Maybe it was because of the appearance filter. "You are the subordinate of the national master, right?" Jun Mocking looked at Zyaju indifferently, waiting for her to continue. Shen Shuwei asked again, "Do you know when the national master will come back?" Jun Mocking. "Old man? Does he look very old?" Shen Shuwei had to admit that the expressionless man was frugal with words, and this sentence was not deceiving. The person in front of him was the best example. "Don't you know?" As soon as Shen Shuwei finished speaking, a familiar voice came from behind him. "Master! Master!" Shen Shuwei looked back in confusion and saw Yasuhan walking towards him. Yasuhan only saw that the figure was familiar from a distance, and when he got closer and saw the side face, he was sure that the man was the master. He hadn't seen his master since Zyaju disappeared. He strode over and saluted. "Master!" The followers behind Yasuhan also saluted, "Master, the Imperial Master." Shen Shuwei was already surprised by the word master, and suddenly she was shocked by the word master, the imperial master. She stared at the man in front of her with wide eyes. Master, the imperial master is so young? No wonder he ignored her when he was called an old man just now. Who wouldn't be depressed when he was called an old man when he was a handsome young man? Jun Mocking looked at the newcomer, his eyes fell on the silver mask, disfigured. Yasuhan's mouth twitched. Who would have thought that the first sentence of the master and disciple meeting was disfigured? No, I'm just used to wearing a mask. Shen Shuwei secretly glanced at the imperial master. He didn't speak according to the routine. He asked if he was disfigured when he met him. Why didn't he pretend to be mysterious? Jun Mocking was not interested in Yasuhan wearing a mask, and said 3 words lightly, "Get up." Yes, Master. Yasuhan got up from the ground and looked at Xiaju, only to see that she was staring at the master. When did the master come back? Why is there no news? Disciple can also welcome him in advance. Jun Mocking, don't like crowds. Yasuhan realized that he asked nonsense after hearing this. The master always liked quietness. It is estimated that even the emperor didn't know that he came back. Moreover, the master must come back for Xiaju. If it weren't for Xiaju, the master probably wouldn't come back. Shen Shuwei stood there awkwardly, looking at Yasuhan for a while, and then at the master of the state. The more she looked, the more guilty she felt. She thought she had a good eye, so why did she think that the master of the state must be an old man with gray hair and a goatee? She didn't expect that the master of the state actually lived in the same palace with Feng Guiyu. Jun Mocking looked at Xiaju and asked Yasuhan, "Did you find Xiaju first?" Yasuhan glanced at Xiaju and replied respectfully, "When my disciple found Xiaju, he was not sure that she was Xiaju. It took more verification to confirm that she was Xiaju." Shen Shuwei, who was named, did not dare to breathe. The master of the state was so powerful, wouldn't he find out that she was a fake? From his tone, he seemed to be very familiar with Feng Guiyu, and probably lived in the same palace before. She held her breath with guilt and stood there honestly, so well behaved. Jun Mocking's eyes returned to Xiaju and found that she lowered her head. This was not like her at all. From childhood to adulthood, even if she did something wrong, she would not lower her head and remain silent, but act coquettishly until you were no longer angry. Xiaju. Shen Shuwei stood up immediately after hearing the voice and blurted out, "Here." This was because she was nervous when she was in school, and she would subconsciously blurt out "here" when she was called. The nervousness and guilt she felt at this moment were no less than when she secretly ate snacks during class. She felt so embarrassed that she wanted to tap her feet. When she looked at the Imperial Master, she forced a smile, "I'm here, Imperial Master." Jun Mocking stared at her for a while, "Let's have lunch together." Shen Chu smiled and said, "The junior is better to obey than to be respectful." Jun Mocking didn't care about her words, and retracted his gaze to look at Yasuhan, "Come with me." Yasuhan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "Yes, master." Shen Shuwei watched the Imperial Master and Yasuhan walk into the main hall, and then she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The Imperial Master's aura was so strong that even the always powerful and arrogant Yasuhan became obedient like a mouse seeing a cat. Eat lunch together. Shen Shuwei planned to cook 2 dishes in the kitchen to make up for her recklessness in the past 2 days. She was also a little greedy. "Go to the Imperial kitchen to get some ingredients back, and I'll write you a list," Shen Shuwei said as she walked into the side hall, took out a pen and paper, and quickly wrote down a few names of ingredients. At this time in the main hall, Jun Mocking sat on the couch, holding a teacup in his hand and took a sip slowly. "Do you know you are wrong?" Yasuhan knelt on the ground with a plop and explained, "Master, I know I am wrong." Jun Mocking asked, "What is wrong?" "Disciple, disciple." Yasuhan hesitated for a long time and didn't say anything. He didn't know what the master was referring to. Jun Mocking looked at Yesuhan with cold eyes. It seems that you have hidden a lot of things from your master. Yesuhan lowered his head and said respectfully, Master, I was wrong. I shouldn't have learned hypnosis secretly. Jun Mocking waved his sleeves, and two strong winds were like two hands. With two slaps, the mask on Yesuhan's cheek fell off, and two slap marks appeared on his fair cheek. Jun Mocking said coldly, You are not big, but your heart is wild. Yesuhan secretly swallowed the sweet taste in his mouth and kowtowed, Master, I am willing to be punished. He didn't know how the master knew that he secretly learned hypnosis, and he didn't dare to ask. Jun Mocking said, Of course he will be punished. Yesuhan didn't dare to say anything, knowing that the master was angry at the moment. Learning hypnosis secretly, two slaps were nothing at all. Jun Mocking put down the teacup and stood up. He walked slowly to Yesuhan and said in a cold voice, Xiaoju's amnesia is related to you. Yesuhan said, Master, it's not my fault. Jun Mocking stared at Yesuhan for a while. He didn't dare to lie, so Xiaoju's amnesia must be due to other reasons. Go and accept the punishment. I'll take my leave. Disciple Yesuhan picked up the mask on the ground, stood up and left. Xuehui had been waiting outside. When he saw Yesuhan coming out, he didn't ask about the two slap marks on his cheeks, and took him to be punished. Yesuhan asked, Xuehui, when did the master come back? I went to the palace to see Princess Juyo. The first thing I did when I returned to the capital yesterday, Xuehui said. I came back yesterday. Yesuhan came to Wuya Palace in the morning yesterday, so the master must have come back after he left. Asterisk. Shen Shuwei worked for a while and made 2 dishes and a soup, all according to her own preferences. She didn't know the taste of the state master. What if he didn't like it? Don't think too much for now. If he doesn't like it, just ask about his preferences and improve it next time. Shen Shuwei asked the little palace maid to bring the food to the table, and she personally went to call the state master to eat. This is how you ask for help, and take the initiative to show your courtesy. When Shen Shuwei arrived at the main hall, she found that Yesuhan had left, and only the imperial master was sitting on the couch with a book in his hand. She walked in and asked carefully, Master, Imperial Master, lunch is ready, shall we eat now? Jun Mocking raised his head and looked at Xiaoju, let's go. Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curved, which was her signature smile. Jun Mocking put down the book in his hand, stood up and went to the side hall with Xiaoju. When he stepped into the restaurant, the little palace maid had already placed the food on the table. Shen Shuwei waited for the imperial master to sit down before she slowly sat down. Looking at the food in front of her, she explained, I don't know what the imperial master likes to eat. Please try it first. If you don't like it, I will change it next time. Jun Mocking glanced at the food in front of him. There were several dishes that were not available in the capital. He looked up at Xiaoju, did you make this? Shen Chu smiled and nodded, yes, of course it's not as good as the imperial chef. You can just eat some. Jun Mocking thought of Xiaoju when she was a child. In order to eat more candied haws and a piece of cake, she would hold her arm and act coquettishly while drawing big cakes. You satisfy me now, and when I grow up, I will make you a lot of delicious food. Good night, Spicy. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 576. Who would have thought that after so many years, he would still have the opportunity to eat food cooked by her own hands? Shen Shuwei saw that he hesitated to move his chopsticks. Could it be that the food was not to his liking? Failed to be courteous the first time? Master Imperial Master, if you don't like this meal, I can make it again for you. June mocking praised, it looks good. He picked up the chopsticks in front of him, picked up a piece of steamed pork, put it to the tip of his nose and smelled it. It was very fragrant. He put it into his mouth and took a bite. It was evenly fat and thin, not greasy, and tasted good. As soon as I sat down, I could smell the aroma of steamed pork, and it became even more delicious when I ate it. Shen Shuwei looked at the appearance of the Imperial Master. He was slow and leisurely, and his demeanor was cold and noble. He became the Imperial Master at a young age, and his appearance was very good. It could be said that he was perfect and impeccable. Are you so handsome and good-looking? She picked up the chopsticks and picked up a piece of steamed pork with doubts. She hadn't eaten it for a long time and missed it very much. She opened her mouth and put the whole piece of steamed pork into her mouth, saying it was delicious. June mocking raised his eyes to look at Xiaoju across from him, and boasted unstintingly, it tastes good too. Shen Shuwei was originally worried that the Imperial Master would not like it, but now she heard his praise with her own ears, and she suddenly felt confident. Master Imperial Master, if you like, eat more. June mocking lowered his eyes and glanced at the food in front of him, and was not polite when he saw something he liked. Shen Shuwei discovered that generally people who eat well and look elegant tend to be silent during sleep and eating. The Imperial Master didn't speak, so naturally she wouldn't disturb others' meal by speaking. She looked at the delicious food on the table and could do better without talking. June mocking raised her head and glanced at Xiaoju across from her. She had already eaten 3 bowls of rice and still had no intention of stopping. She had a good appetite. Shen Shuwei finished 4 bowls of rice and was just full. She was satisfied and picked up the wet handkerchief prepared by the little palace maid in advance and wiped her mouth. When she raised her head, she saw that the Imperial Master had just put down the bowl and chopsticks and picked up the wet handkerchief to wipe the corners of his lips. The details reveal a cool nobility. She lowered her head and glanced at herself. In comparison, she looked a little sloppy. The little palace maid stepped forward and removed the dishes one by one. After dinner, Shen Shuwei and June mocking sat on the couch, drinking new tea brought by the palace maid. June mocking asked, "When did you start learning to cook?" Shen Shuwei raised his head and glanced at the Imperial Preceptor. Unexpectedly, the Imperial Preceptor also liked to talk about these boring issues. "I started learning it when I was 10 years old, and I learned it when I was 10 years old." She was very interested in it after watching a food program, so she would learn it as long as it was about gourmet cooking or pastry baking. Later, after she got her first mobile phone, many delicious foods could be found on the internet. As long as she liked to eat, she would learn it. You don't have to travel thousands of miles to eat what you want. You can just buy the ingredients and cook it at home, which is more convenient than anything else. June mocking looked at Xiaoju quietly. Before she was 10 years old, she was a little girl who didn't touch Yang Chun Shui. She started learning to cook when she was 10 years old. The things she just ate are what she learned. Shen Shuwei found that the Imperial Master had been staring at her, and she suddenly felt very stressed. In order to avoid embarrassment, she thought of dinner. "Master Imperial Master, what would you like to eat for dinner?" June mocking said, "You don't have to prepare dinner carefully. You can eat whatever is given in the Imperial dining room." Shen Shuwei asked again, "Are you used to the food in the Imperial dining room?" June mocking said calmly, "I'm not picky about my meals." Shen Shuwei. She could see with her own eyes just now that the dishes served by the Imperial Master were cooked by her. He didn't pick up any of the dishes in the Imperial kitchen with chopsticks. "Your Majesty, it is not good for you to lie." Asterisk. Ye Yuchen went into the palace to visit Yesuhan, thinking that his health would be better after 2 days of nursing. However, when he stepped into the palace, he saw Yesuhan lying on the bed motionless. There was no color at all on that face. He strode over and asked, "What's wrong with third brother? Is the injury serious again?" "Yasuhan has been lying on the bed for an hour, and now he can only lie down." "No. Then why are you lying on the bed? You are too stubborn, aren't you?" Yayuchin said, and went to lift his clothes to check his injuries. Before he even lifted up his clothes, Yasuhan held him down. Such a simple movement caused injuries on his back, causing him to frown in pain. Yayuchin glanced at his hand that was being held down, then raised his head and looked at Yasuhan. "Are you hiding something from me?" Yasuhan knew that Yayuchin would not give up unless he explained the reason. "It's because of punishment." When Yayuchin heard about being punished, he would think of the Prince Yayuksi. He said angrily, "Why was he punished? Did the prince resort to tricks again?" Yasuhan glanced at the impatient Yayuchin and explained, "No, it's, master." Being able to become the apprentice of the imperial master was something that everyone dreamed of. In the capital city, Yasuhan was the only prince who worshipped the imperial master as his master. At that time, no matter whether he was a dignitary or a member of the royal family, no one was envious or jealous of master. Yayuchin opened his eyes wide after reacting and said in disbelief, "You mean the imperial master has returned to the palace? Why is there no news at all?" Yasuhan said, "I just came back yesterday, and I just saw you today. Master doesn't like the excitement, so I didn't notify my father." "No wonder, I don't have any news at all." Yayuchin looked at his back and asked, "Then why does the imperial master punish you?" Yasuhan didn't hide it from him, "I learned martial arts secretly." The master taught him a lot of kung fu, but there were also many things he didn't teach him. He discovered hypnosis by accident. After seeing the effect of hypnosis, the temptation was too great, and he couldn't help but learn it secretly. He was very careful, and didn't know how the master found out. The master was always strict in punishing people. If it weren't for his deep internal strength, he would have been paralyzed and disabled. Although Yayuchin sympathized with his brother's punishment, he didn't approve of his brother's behavior. "You are so good at martial arts, but you still learn martial arts secretly? You are so greedy." Yasuhan didn't refute. He was indeed greedy. He wanted to become stronger, stand by Xiaju, and give her enough sense of security. But after experiencing Xiaju's disappearance, he found that he was still far away from being strong. "Forget it, it has happened and it can't be changed. You should take good care of your injuries first." Yayuchin could guess how badly he was injured without looking at the injury, otherwise he would not be able to lie down. Asterisk. During dinner, Shen Shuwei prepared 2 more dishes by herself. As the saying goes, if you want to capture a person's heart, you must first capture his stomach. Similarly, if you want others to help you, capturing their stomachs is twice the result with half the effort. She looked at the food on the table. The imperial master hadn't come yet. She thought that even the emperor didn't know that the imperial master had returned to the palace, so the imperial kitchen definitely didn't send any food to the imperial master. This was a good opportunity for her to get closer to the imperial master. Thinking of this, Shen Shuwei ordered the little palace maid to bring the food box. The little palace maid brought the food box without saying a word, and watched the master put the food into the food box one by one. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Master, what are you doing?" "I'm having dinner with the imperial master. I can't let him go hungry, right?" Shen Shuwei said without stopping her hands. The little maid nodded, not quite understanding. "Wouldn't it be more convenient to call the imperial master over?" Shen Shuwei chuckled, "You are still young, you don't understand. How can it be more sincere to call someone over than to personally deliver it to the door?" The little maid has heard this sentence no less than 100 times, and her ears are almost calloused. Why doesn't she understand? Shen Shuwei rushed out with the food box, and saw the Imperial Master walking towards the side with a steady pace. She was stunned for a moment. Why did the Imperial Master come uninvited? After reacting, she hurriedly turned around and walked in, took out the food in the food box one by one and placed it on the dining table. The little maid looked confused. "Master, what are you doing?" "Don't talk." Shen Shuwei worked without raising her head. The little maid immediately shut her mouth. After Shen Shuwei took out the dishes, she handed the food box to the little maid and asked her to put it away. Before she could even say a word, she saw the figure of the Imperial Master coming towards her from the corner of her eye. She smiled and greeted, "Imperial Master." June Mocking looked at Xiaoju, reached out and touched her head, and then sat down at the dining table. Shen Shuwei, who was touched on the head by the Imperial Master, stood there for a full minute. She looked at the Imperial Master who had already sat down at the dining table. "Why did he touch my head?" She sat down opposite him with doubts. If she had known that he would come by himself, she would not be busy with this and that. "Imperial Master, you didn't ask the Imperial Kitchen to send you food, did you?" June Mocking said, "I don't need the Imperial Kitchen to send it when I eat with you." Shen Shuwei blinked her beautiful big eyes twice, and she couldn't keep up with the Imperial Master's train of thought. "Imperial Master, why didn't you tell me in advance? I almost didn't wait for you in the past." She would have finished her meal halfway. June Mocking said, "Didn't I tell you before lunch?" Shen Shuwei. So what he meant by eating lunch together is that we will eat all 3 meals together in the future. He said it so naturally, just like a master. There is a big difference between being active and being passive. Shen Shuwei felt a little depressed, but after seeing the sumptuous dinner, she felt relieved after finishing 4 bowls of rice. During the meal, she secretly looked at the master of the state opposite her and found that the dishes he picked up were still the 2 dishes she cooked herself. How did he accurately pick those 2 dishes? Was it a coincidence or a sharp eye? After June Mocking finished his meal, he looked up at Xiaoju, his voice as cold as frost, "I will go back in a few days, and you will go back with me." Shen Shuwei was stunned for a long time after hearing this, and asked in a confused manner, "Where are you going back?" June Mocking, "You will know when you go there." Shen Shuwei didn't know what the master of the state was thinking, but why did he take her away? Did the master of the state and the emperor discuss it? She couldn't leave, or what would happen to Xiao Jinyan? What if the fake identity was exposed? Wouldn't it be over? "But I'm used to living here, and I won't be used to a strange place." June Mocking still knows Xiaoju, and the only thing that can make her uncomfortable is food. "You'll get used to it after 2 days." When June Mocking left, Shen Shuwei felt sick. She took out paper and pen and wrote a letter to Xiao Jinyan. When Sichuan saw Xiaoju taking paper and pen, the whole cat felt sick because it was running errands again. Sure enough, it saw Xiaoju walking towards it with a small purse and used it as a carrier pigeon. After Shen Shuwei tied the small purse, he touched its fluffy little head. "Be good, I'll prepare delicious food for you tomorrow." Sichuan stood up immediately when he heard about the delicious food and called out excitedly, "Meow." Shen Chu smiled and said, "Go quickly and come back quickly. I'll wait for the reply, understand?" Sichuan turned around and ran out. He had to fight for the delicious food. Sichuan was petite and agile, shuttling between the red walls and green tiles. Cats are agile, and Sichuan is more agile than ordinary cats, and can easily avoid patrolling guards. Xiao Jinyan always felt that the man looked at him with something wrong because of the 2 people he met today. He and Qin Xiao checked the identities of the 2 people for a day but couldn't find out. Xiaoju has been in the palace for some time, and Xiao Jinyan's sleep has become very poor. He has nightmares almost every night, and the fear he has never had is very real. After waking up in the middle of the night, he couldn't fall asleep. When Sichuan came, Xiao Jinyan hadn't fallen asleep yet. He learned martial arts and found Sichuan when he came in. Seeing Sichuan, Xiao Jinyan showed his first smile of the day. When Sichuan jumped into his arms, his hand went straight to the small pouch on Sichuan's neck. If he hadn't thought Sichuan's neck was not strong enough, he would have been unable to resist and pulled it directly. He took out the letter from the pouch and couldn't wait to open it. Xiaoju always wrote short letters. A few sentences were all key points. Husband, the national master is back, excited expression. I live in the same palace with the national master. The national master is very, very powerful. I guess he knows magic. Surprised expression. The national master is easy to get along with. He always speaks in an unconventional way. It's a bit hard to keep up with his brain circuit. A forehead full of question mark expression. The national master likes to eat the food I cook. I can quickly catch his stomach and then ask him for help. Struggling expression. Xiao Jinyan frowned after reading the letter. It is naturally a good thing for the national master to come back, but why does the national master live in the same palace with Xiaoju? And Xiaoju actually washes his hands and cooks for others. Xiao Jinyan felt it was too much just thinking about it. How could Xiaoju cook for another man? Sichuan looked at Xiao Jinyan in confusion. You wrote a letter, but I still have to go back. Xiao Jinyan couldn't sit still at this moment. He put away the letter and lifted Sichuan by the back of the neck and jumped out of the window. Sichuan looked angry and calm at the same time. It was a cat that had been in the world. Suddenly jumping out of the window, it shook its legs, showing that it was not afraid. Xiao Jinyan had been to the palace several times and was very familiar with the road to Wuya Palace. It didn't take long for him to arrive at Wuya Palace. He went straight to Xiaoju's bedroom and climbed in through the window. Shen Shuwei yawned and felt a little drowsy, and saw a familiar figure walking towards her. She suddenly opened her eyes wide. Jinyan, you are so brave. Xiao Jinyan walked to the bed and sat down, looking her up and down. I'm worried about you, come in and take a look. The national teacher lives opposite, he is super powerful, if he finds out. Before Shen Shuwei finished speaking, a cold voice came from outside the door, Xiaoju. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 577. Shen Shuwei's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Xiao Jinyan and thought, why did she become a crow's mouth? The good does not work and the bad does. What about her coy luck? Shen Shuwei leaned close to Xiao Jinyan's ear and said, you find a place to hide for a while, and I'll deal with him. Shen Shuwei knew that the imperial master was very good at knocking, so he spoke in a low voice. Xiao Jinyan also knew that being discovered was not a good thing, so he nodded. After Shen Shuwei got out of bed, he pointed to the wardrobe beside him and motioned for him to hide in it. After Xiao Jinyan hid in the closet, Shen Shuwei put on a long gown, opened the door and walked out, feeling the coolness of autumn in the wind blowing on her face. The imperial master's slender body like an immortal stood at the foot of the steps. The windless clothes and the aura of an immortal made people feel like they were standing on the clouds. She asked nonsense, Master Imperial Master, is something wrong? June Mocking's cold eyes glanced at the room behind her, someone entered your boudoir. Shen Shuwei was startled when he heard this. As soon as Xiao Jinyan came in with his front foot, the Imperial Master noticed it. This was amazing. She could only deny it with all her courage. Master Imperial Master, are you mistaken? How could someone enter my boudoir? Seeing that she didn't believe it, June Mocking said, I'll find out when I go in and take a look. When Shen Shuwei saw him talking, she walked over. She didn't mean to be joking at all. She hurriedly reached out to stop him. Master Imperial Master, it's so late. It's not a good idea for a foreigner to go into a girl's boudoir, right? I'm just getting ready to take a rest. In ancient times, Men could not enter a woman's boudoir at will. The national master, who is like a direct immortal, should know this truth well, right? June mocking said, I am different from other men. Shen Shuwei looked at the imperial master in front of him. Apart from his better appearance and temperament, what was the difference? One more eye or one more mouth? Master Imperial Master is naturally different from other men, but no matter how different he is still a man, so he should avoid suspicion. June mocking paused after hearing this, and looked inside through her shoulder with cold eyes. There was a lamp lit inside, which was brighter than outside. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Xiaju, without forcing him to go in and take a look. You go in and take a look. Good. Shen Shuwei turned around and patted her small chest. She was scared to death. After entering, she immediately came to the closet. When she opened the closet door, she saw Xiao Jinyan standing among a pile of pink dresses. The light was too dark to see. What comes? She leaned close to Xiao Jinyan's ear and said, Master Imperial Master knows that someone has entered my room. It's so powerful. Xiao Jinyan heard the voices outside the door through the closet door. Although he did not see the Imperial Master's face, this alone showed that the Imperial Master was indeed very powerful. I'll go out and send him away. Shen Chu whispered and walked out. When she came out again, Shen Shuwei was still a little nervous, because the National Master was more powerful than she thought. Master Imperial Master, there is no one in my room. It's late at night. You should go back and rest. I want to rest too. June mocking asked, Are you sure there is no one there? Shen Shuwei said in an affirmative tone, Of course, my room is only a little big, don't I know if there is anyone there? Besides, this is the palace and it is heavily guarded. There is no need to worry, Master Imperial Master. June mocking stared at her for a while, not obsessed with whether there was anyone in the room. You should rest early. After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the main hall. Shen Shuwei watched the Imperial Master leave and breathed a sigh of relief. How could there be such a powerful person? When the Imperial Master entered the main hall, she turned around and trotted in, closed the door and bolted it. Xiao Jinyan had already come out of the closet. Jinyan, the Imperial Master has returned to the main hall. Shen Shuwei stepped forward and took his hand, and couldn't help but sigh, so powerful. If he is not the Imperial Master, who will be the Imperial Master? Xiao Jinyan himself is a martial arts student. Although he cannot remember the original memory, he knows that no matter how powerful a martial arts student is, he cannot be as vigilant as a national master. I don't think the Imperial Master is that easy to deal with. You mean that the Imperial Master went back on purpose? Shen Shuwei thought of this possibility and couldn't help but start to worry. Then wouldn't it be difficult for you to leave the palace? Xiao Jinyan actually wanted to meet the legendary Imperial Master, but the timing was wrong. Now that he's here, let's make peace with him. I won't leave until dawn tomorrow. Maybe he's already asleep. That's right, don't think about this first. Shen Shuwei pulled Xiao Jinyan to the bedside and began to undress him. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at Xiaoju, who was undressing him. He hadn't seen her for just a few days, but it felt like a long time had passed. I also realized that not seeing each other for one day is like 3 autumns. Shen Shuwei said while taking off his clothes, I always feel that the relationship between the Imperial Master and Feng Wu is not simple. Xiao Jinyan asked, why do you say that? Today at dinner, the Imperial Master told me that he wanted me to take him back. How could someone who has nothing to do with him say this? Going back to where? I don't know either. The Imperial Master didn't say where it is. Xiao Jinyan frowned, what kind of person is the Imperial Master? Shen Shuwei blurted out without even thinking, the Imperial Master is super young, super good looking, and has a cool temperament. Xiao Jinyan's face changed when he heard Xiaju use 3 super words to describe the National Master. When he heard it, his face turned completely dark. To praise another man so wholeheartedly in front of him. After Shen Shuwei finished describing it, he felt that it was not enough. In short, no matter how gorgeous the words are, they cannot describe 1/10 of the National Normal University. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help asking, how young is the Imperial Master? Shen Shuwei couldn't tell, because the Imperial Master looked really young, but his tone of voice and attitude were very much like an elder. About 30. A man in his 30s, Xiao Jinyan boldly guessed, the Imperial Master likes Feng Wu. Shen Shuwei looked at him in surprise, how do you know? Xiao Jinyan said, if he didn't like you, why did he say he wanted to take you away? Shen Shuwei corrected, it's Feng Wu who's going to take you away, not me. Aren't you pretending to be Feng Wu now? In the eyes of the Imperial Master, you are Feng Wu. Shen Shuwei. What Xiao Jinyan said was not wrong. But I think the Imperial Master's attitude towards Feng Wu is not like the attitude towards his sweetheart. As a man, Xiao Jinyan thought he understood men better. A man would not be nice to a woman for no reason, let alone a person like the Imperial Master. Then what do you think is the relationship between the National Master and Feng Wu? Are they good friends? Or master and apprentice? Shen Shuwei touched his chin, but Yesuhan is the apprentice of the National Master. He calls himself a master, but he didn't call himself a master in front of me. It's too strange. Xiao Jinyan hugged her in his arms and said in an almost commanding tone, you just stay away from him. Shen Shuwei was about to nod, because there is a difference between men and women, it's right to keep a distance, but if you stay away from the National Master, how can you get close to him and ask him for help? When you recover your memory, we will withdraw and make sure you stay away from him. Xiao Jinyan was a little helpless. He held her and lay on the huge bed. Suddenly, he remembered the plot in the dream. It might be because they looked similar. He didn't know if it was Feng Wu or Xiaju. Shen Shuwei supported her chin with one hand and stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help asking, what's wrong? Do you have something to say? Shen Shuwei nodded, Jinyan, Feng Wu didn't like you before, did you? Xiao Jinyan didn't answer but asked, why do you ask that? Shen Shuwei said, because you are childhood sweethearts, but you don't remember. Xiao Jinyan, what kind of logic is this? You calculate the time, how old was I when I was a proton here, how old was Feng Wu? A little kid, saying he likes her. Shen Shuwei blinked her beautiful big eyes twice, why are you so excited? Xiao Jinyan said, how am I excited? Okay, I am excited. Anyway, you are my husband. Shen Shuwei yawned, go to sleep, I'm so sleepy. Xiao Jinyan had originally made up his mind to talk about some of the scenes he dreamed of, but now he couldn't say a word. If he did, the misunderstanding would probably deepen. He hoped that the person in the dream was Xiaju, but he felt that it was more likely to be Feng Wu, because the person in the dream was still a little girl. He pinched his eyebrows, and only after recovering his memory could he know what happened before. Shen Shuwei reminded before going to bed, Jinyan, remember to wake me up when you leave in the morning. Xiao Jinyan opened his eyes and looked at her, are you ready to leave the palace with me? No, I'm worried that the national teacher will find you. Xiao Jinyan laughed softly, if the national teacher finds out, the two of us can't beat him. We are gentlemen, how can we fight? I'll talk to him, and you can leave quickly. Xiao Jinyan. Can it be like this? Maybe he's already asleep, I just need to go faster. Shen Shuwei said, that won't work. It's better to be cautious in a place where we are not familiar with. Xiao Jinyan naturally understood the reason, but every time he left, Xiaoju would sleep soundly. If she was suddenly woken up, she might still be in a bad mood. That night, Xiao Jinyan still didn't sleep well, but it was much better than the previous days. Before the sky turned pale, Xiao Jinyan woke up and started to put on clothes. After he was dressed, he woke her up. Shen Chuwei was sleeping soundly. When she heard Xiao Jinyan calling her, she was stunned for a long time before she reacted. She glanced out the window, it was pitch black. "You're leaving so early?" Xiao Jinyan said, "It's late." Shen Chuwei got up, and Xiao Jinyan took out a coat for her to put on. The wind was very cold at night. After putting on clothes, Xiao Jinyan opened the door and was about to go out. Shen Chuwei picked up Swichuan, who was sleeping, and suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Xiaju with a confused face. She rubbed Swichuan's little head. "Swichuan, go out and explore the way." Swichuan. It knew that waking it up in the middle of the night was definitely not for eating delicious food. Swichuan shook the fine hair on his body, and then walked out swaggeringly. Shen Chuwei lay on the doorframe, watching Swichuan walking in front of the main hall in the moonlight, with his head held high and striding, like a patrolling soldier. Meow. Swichuan howled twice towards the main hall. Shen Chuwei. Xiao Jinyan. Just when the two were curious about why Swichuan was calling, they saw a white figure flying out of the main hall, and then landed steadily in front of Swichuan. Shen Chuwei couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Swichuan was too powerful. Xiao Jinyan was also stunned. He couldn't appear in a second when Swichuan called. The national teacher was really powerful. In the darkness of night, one cannot clearly see the Imperial Master's appearance, but one can sense some of his temperament, and Xiaju was not exaggerating. Swichuan raised his little head and barked a few more times at the Imperial Master. In fact, his limbs were shaking. The person in front of him was the Imperial Master. Shen Chuwei leaned close to Xiao Jinyan's ear and whispered, "It's my turn to appear." Without waiting for Xiao Jinyan to answer, she opened the door and walked out. Xiao Jinyan is a smart man, and he knew from Shen Chuwei's actions that she wanted to make a splash. Shen Chu slightly pulled up his clothes and walked over with a yawn. "Master, Imperial Master, did the snowball disturb you?" June Mocking raised her head and looked at Xiaoju, who was walking over. She had always been unable to wake up due to thunder, but she actually got up in the middle of the night. "Why did you wake up?" Shen Chu smiled and explained, "I heard Xuetuan barking, and I was worried that something had happened to it, so I came out to take a look." When Shen Chuwei walked over, Swichuan turned around and walked towards her. Shen Chu slightly bent down to pick up Xuetuan, and when she saw that Xuetuan was burrowing into her arms, she was probably frightened so much that even tigers and lions were afraid of the Imperial Master. June Mocking took in the scene in front of her and asked, "When did you sleep so lightly?" Shen Chuwei opened his eyes slightly and said, "Master, Imperial Master, you don't know something. Girls are naturally easily frightened, so I woke up after Xuetuan screamed a few times." When Shen Chuwei's words were heard in June Mocking's ears, he spoke with his eyes closed. "Last night Tigan sneezed, did you know?" Shen Chuwei was stunned for a moment, then realized, "I know, it's so big, it's different from a snowball, it's okay." The Tigan not far away snorted dissatisfiedly after hearing this. The Tigan is a giant beast and its humming sound is louder than that of ordinary beasts. Shen Chu heard the sound and looked away, and saw a pair of big green eyes. He had been with the tiger and lion for so long, and he knew he was dissatisfied when he heard the grunt. He probably heard what she just said. The Imperial Master is afraid to come over now, and he will probably pester her tomorrow. June Mocking looked at Xiaoju, who was lying so much. The older he got, the more fluent his lying skills became. Xiao Jinyan saw Xiaoju and the Imperial Master chatting. Although he was a little dissatisfied, he still slipped out of the back door for the sake of Deju. Just when Xiao Jinyan was performing Qing Kung Fu, June Mocking noticed, "You stay here." Before Shen Chuwei could realize what was going on, he saw the Imperial Master flying away. Her first reaction was that the Imperial Master was going to arrest Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei said hey and squatted on the ground holding her stomach, looking very uncomfortable. She kept looking at the Imperial Master from the corner of her eyes. She was secretly relieved when she saw the Imperial Master who had flown away flying back. Jun Mocking squatted down in front of her. In the night, he couldn't see her face. Xiaju, what's wrong? Shen Shuwei said with a painful look on his face, I have a stomachache. When Jun Mocking heard this, he picked her up and walked towards the bedroom. Being hugged by the master and princess, or something that others could only wish for, was a bit scary for Shen Shuwei. Her eyes widened and she began to struggle, Master National Preceptor, please let me go. I don't care about men and women. I can leave on my own. Jun Mocking walked quickly and steadily, looking down at Xiaju who was still struggling, what's wrong with me hugging my own daughter? Good night Spicy. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. I haven't thought about the introduction to the new book yet, I'll send it out tomorrow. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 578. Shen Shuwei was struck by thunder when she heard this, and she almost froze on the spot without reacting. She and Xiao Jinyan had guessed so many possible relationships, including the closest ones, but they had never thought of this kind of relationship. You are so young, and you have a daughter as old as me. You are so lucky. Feng Wu is also so lucky to have such a handsome and capable father. It would be difficult for other men to cheat him since he was a child, right? Jun Mocking lowered his eyes and looked at the person in his arms. The little girl who stuck to him back then has grown up so big and gained some weight, but for him, it makes no difference. Well, it's quite lucky. Shen Shuwei. I'm teasing you for getting married early, okay? You still nodded. You have a 19-year-old daughter at such a young age, how old was she when you got married? After being shocked, Shen Shuwei also found that the princess hug of the national teacher was very stable, not at all shaken. How did he do it? She found another problem. The national teacher treated her as a daughter, but she was a fake. After Shen Shuwei was put on the bed by Jun Mocking, she tried to calm down her shock and nervousness. Jun Mocking saw that Xiaju had just frowned in pain, but now his eyebrows were relaxed and his heartbeat was slightly faster. Does your stomach not hurt? Shen Shuwei thought that Xiao Jinyan must have left by now, so there was no need to pretend anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. It hurt a lot just now. It might be because I came out too quickly and got a stitch in the side. Facing the national master, lying really tests one's psychological quality. Jun Mocking said, it's good that it doesn't hurt. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at the national master in front of her. He was really young. She couldn't help asking, you don't look old. Where did such a big daughter come from? Jun Mocking explained, practicing martial arts can keep your face young. Shen Shuwei. Keeping your face young is so simple? I've only heard that cultivating immortals can keep your face young, and practicing martial arts can strengthen your body. The implication is that I'm young, so don't lie to me. Jun Mocking didn't deny it either, you can understand it this way. Shen Shuwei opened her eyes wide. What did the national master mean by this? Is it true that you cultivate immortality? It's too fantasy. Are you an immortal? She asked cautiously. Jun Mocking, no. Shen Shuwei. Okay, she thought too much. Jun Mocking glanced out the window. It was still an hour before dawn. He retracted his gaze and looked at Xiaju, you sleep a little longer. If there is anything, we can talk about it in the morning. Shen Shuwei was nervous and wanted the national teacher to leave quickly. Okay. After Jun Mocking left, he closed the door considerately. Shen Shuwei lay on the bed, still unable to believe that the national teacher was Feng Wu's father. How nice it would be if she had such a young, handsome, and awesome father. She could really be a salted fish without restraint. Wait, the national teacher is Feng Wu's father, wouldn't it be easier to ask him to help? Shen Shuwei was so excited that she fell asleep almost immediately after closing her eyes. After dawn, the little palace maid came to wake her up. Usually, she would wake up after being called several times, but today she woke up after being called twice. Shen Shuwei opened her eyes and saw that it was bright outside. The sun had moved. It's over. I got up too late. The maid looked confused. Master, don't you usually get up at this time? It's different today. I have a father. Shen Shuwei lifted the quilt and got up. The maid looked shocked. Master, are you dreaming? If it's not a dream, how could I suddenly have a father? Shen Shuwei has always been used to sleeping. She doesn't know whether the master has eaten. She ordered, go ask my father. No, go ask the master if he has had breakfast. If not, I will eat with him. Yes, the maid ran out. Shen Shuwei came out after getting dressed. The maid came back. Master, the master hasn't had breakfast yet. I have asked the master to come. As soon as the maid finished speaking, June Mocking walked in slowly. Shen Shuwei still felt a little uncomfortable when she saw the master of state. She thought it might be because she was a fake and felt guilty. At the table, Shen Shuwei was already hungry. After the master of state started eating, she picked up the chopsticks, picked up the meat bun and put it into her mouth. She took a big bite. After tasting the delicious soup, she chewed with satisfaction. June Mocking drank 2 mouthfuls of porridge and looked up at Xiaju opposite. His face was as big as a palm, and one cheek was bulging. The way he ate had not changed at all. Shen Shuwei ate for a while. There was something in her stomach, so she was not in a hurry to eat. She drank a mouthful of porridge and secretly glanced at the master of state opposite. She put down the bowl and couldn't help asking, Master, Imperial Master, are you really my father? June Mocking put down his chopsticks and picked up the wet wipes beside him. Do you want to drop blood to identify your relationship? Shen Shuwei shook her head. That thing is useless. What you said must be true. I'm just a little surprised. June Mocking, well, because you don't remember. Shen Shuwei smiled guiltily. Yes, I don't remember anything about the past. Fortunately, they think Feng Wu has lost his memory, otherwise they don't know how to respond. She lowered her head and continued to eat the meat buns. Hey, today's meat buns are better than yesterday's. June Mocking asked, do you want to restore your previous memories? Shen Shuwei just took a bite of the meat bun and was stunned. Restore your previous memories? She is not Feng Wu, how can she restore her previous memories? Wouldn't it be equivalent to being exposed? I'm fine now. I don't want to remember the past memories just yet. I'll talk about them later, okay? June Mocking stared at her for a long time without forcing her. Well, you can do it yourself. Shen Chu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If the Imperial Master forced her to restore her non-existent memory, then it would be a joke. She took a bite of the meat bun, and suddenly her eyes lit up. She raised her head and looked at the Imperial Master again. When she spoke, she was still hesitant about whether to call her father. She had never called her dad before, so she really couldn't say it. June Mocking saw that she was hesitant to speak. Do you have something to say? Shen Shuwei swallowed the meat buns in his mouth, and after thinking about it, he asked, if a person loses his memory, are you able to restore his memory? June Mocking nodded, yes, it's just a little troublesome. Shen Shuwei's eyes lit up when he heard this. As long as he had the ability, Xiao Jinyan's memory would have a chance to recover. Sure enough, his original decision was right. It seems a little inappropriate to speak now. She took a bite of the meat bun and thought about how to persuade the Imperial Master to help Xiao Jinyan regain his memory. Does the Imperial Master know Xiao Jinyan? If he said they were friends, would he believe it? June mocking asked, "Do you want to restore your memory again?" Shen Shuwei shook his head vigorously, "No, I'm fine as I am now." June mocking didn't ask any more questions after hearing this. After breakfast, Shen Shuwei followed the imperial master and opened his mouth countless times, but the cry-daddy just couldn't come out. Having never experienced father's love, she really didn't know how to get along with the dad in front of her. June mocking called out, "Xiaju." Shen Shuwei took 2 steps forward and came to him. I'm here." June mocking said, "Tell me what happened to you in the past few years." "I've been pretty good these past few years." Shen Shuwei was a little embarrassed. She had been in the Daxia Palace in the past few years, and going back to modern times, there was no way to say it. June mocking asked, "Where did you go after you disappeared?" "It's a very far away place, and you wouldn't even know it." "If you don't tell me, how can you know that I don't know?" Shen Chu touched her nose slightly. She didn't know Feng Wu's experience. How could she talk about her affairs in modern times? Just making things up can easily expose the truth. Seeing that she was silent, June mocking asked again, "What? You don't want to tell me?" Shen Shuwei shook his head vigorously, "Of course not." June mocking stared at Xiaju for a while. "I just want to know how you have been over the past few years. You have been pampered since you were a child. Do you feel helpless when you suddenly arrive in a strange place?" Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment when she heard this. No one had ever asked her this before, but the national master, who was so cold and paralyzed in front of her, would actually ask her. "There was an earthquake at that time. I ran out of the house and my ears were temporarily deafened. Maybe I was frightened. I sat there without responding for a long time. The police uncle thought I was frightened and kept coaxing me. There was a police uncle holding candy. 'Come and coax me.'" Thinking of the scene of eating candy, Shen Shuwei felt as if it happened yesterday. She was eating candy, and several police uncles surrounded her and laughed, saying that she was too cute. She is actually too greedy. June mocking continued to ask, "What happened next?" Shen Chu was stunned for a moment, and unknowingly told the story of the earthquake he encountered when he was 10 years old. Maybe he was shocked by the scene at that time, so he always remembered it very clearly. "Later, I went to school. The teacher always liked to control me, but the teacher would bring me food. So I took care of it, and she didn't complain at all. In fact, every teacher she had seemed to like to take care of her, maybe because she had no parents. While taking care of her, they would also give her food." June mocking knew that her teacher liked her very much. "You like to sleep in class, and the teacher doesn't care about you. I'm afraid you won't learn anything." Shen Chu slightly opened his eyes. "How do you know?" "During class, she loved to sleep, so the teacher moved her desk to the front. Under the supervision of her teacher, she successfully passed the high school entrance exam." June mocking replied with 5 words, "There is no better daughter than a father." Shen Chu felt guilty for a while. What she told was the truth. Fortunately, the imperial master did not doubt it, otherwise the game would be over. However, the imperial master is not curious about the policeman in her mouth. It's wired. June mocking went to see Yehouting today and mentioned Xiaju's marriage. Although Xiaju and Yesuhan had verbally agreed, they still had to listen to Xiaju's own wishes. "You're not young anymore, do you have a sweetheart?" Recommended new book. The fake daughter only wanted to be a salted fish and was pampered. Everyone said that Zhang Yuning had a good life. He was born into a wealthy family, lived a life of fine clothes and fine food, and was Tanhua's sweetheart. As a result, the day before the engagement, the bridegroom visited her and regretted the engagement and married another woman, and that person was Zhang Yuning's best friend. When everyone thought that Zhang Yuning would be obsessed with it and seek life and death, she turned around and got engaged to the prestigious General Siet. Not long after the engagement, the real daughter returned, but she became a fake daughter. Not only was she homeless, but General Xie also broke off the engagement. Everyone was waiting to see her joke. General Xie had the same plan when he came to the house to break off the engagement. Zhang Yuning wiped away her tears and looked at General Xie. Do you really want to break off the engagement? Don't you have any affection for me these days? But my heart was filled with joy. Retreat, retreat, sooner rather than later, and a large sum of consolation money can be put into your pocket. Can friendship be eaten? Might as well feed the dog. General Xie, is money so important? My dears, please add the new book to your bookshelf. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 579. Speaking of the sweetheart, it is naturally Xiao Jinyan. She and Xiao Jinyan got married first and then fell in love. They have two super cute babies. Most importantly, both babies can play soy sauce. If it is her biological father, it is okay to say it. However, the state master is Feng Wu's biological father, not hers, so it is naturally difficult to tell the truth. She looked at the state master with doubts. Why do you suddenly ask this? Jun Mocking did not hide it from her. The emperor mentioned your marriage with Yesuhan. I see that you are not young anymore. You should consider it. Shen Shuwei was petrified on the spot. Feng Wu and Yesuhan are engaged? So tricky. Thinking of Yesuhan's crazy temper, if Feng Wu really married him, would she be scared to death? Even if she is not scared to death, she will be scared to depression. She looked at the cold and frosty imperial master in front of her and asked cautiously, what do you think? Jun Mocking, my thoughts are not important, what's important is your thoughts? Shen Shuwei. Jun Mocking asked, are there any problems? Shen Shuwei shook her head vigorously, and did not forget to flatter, no, no, there are not many fathers as open-minded as you now. As a daughter, I am very honored to have such an open-minded father like you. Even if she said that she had a husband, a son, and a daughter, the imperial master probably wouldn't think there was anything wrong. Maybe he would think she was so amazing, solving two major events in life, getting married, and being a mother. Jun Mocking was used to Xiaoju's sweet and coaxing personality. Even after so many years of separation, Xiaoju's personality didn't change much. So, who do you like? Well, yes, but... Shen Shuwei was struggling whether to bring up Xiao Jinyan, but was afraid that if she said it out, it would be easy to be exposed. What should I do? Jun Mocking's voice was cold. Just what? Shen Shuwei looked at the master of the imperial household who seemed to be easy to talk to. If I tell you, you won't embarrass him, right? Jun Mocking asked back, why should I embarrass him? Shen Shuwei smiled in her heart, how do I know? Maybe you like your apprentice, but what if you don't like Xiao Jinyan? Jun Mocking saw her hesitant look, so he said, bring him to see me. Shen Shuwei was so surprised that the master of the imperial household didn't seem to be a person who remembered things. I haven't said who it is yet, are you so anxious? Jun Mocking, you will know after we meet. Shen Shuwei. It seems to make sense. Just when Shen Shuwei was hesitating, a piece of mung bean ice cream suddenly appeared in front of her, and a cold voice came from above her head. Your ice cream. Shen Shuwei looked up and down at the master of the imperial household. She followed him just now and didn't see him holding anything in his hand. Where did you take it out from? Jun Mocking, space. Shen Shuwei was stunned on the spot. The word space was too familiar to her, because she also had a space. Now the state master also has a space. What does this mean? This means that the mung bean ice cream disappeared that day because the state master put the mung bean ice cream into the space. If she guessed correctly, it should be put into the frozen storage room. June mocking saw her staring at the ice cream and thought she was idle. You can only eat one a day. Shen Shuwei took the ice cream excitedly and nodded obediently, I know. After the state master left, Shen Shuwei ate the ice cream in one hand and took out the token in the other hand, intending to leave the palace and discuss this matter with Xiao Jinyan. Before she got on the arch bridge, she saw a huge monster running towards her, and she could clearly feel that the ground was shaking slightly. Even if she didn't look back, she knew which one was running over. Awoo! The tiger lion beast opened its mouth and bit Xiaoju's sleeve. Shen Shuwei looked back and saw the tiger lion beast touching her pink sleeves with its mouth, which looked a little cute and a little aggrieved. It was probably because of what happened last night. What can be done if the tiger lion beast is aggrieved and unhappy? Of course, it is coaxing. Shen Shuwei rubbed the huge head of the tiger lion beast. Since trimming its hair, she found that although its hair is not as fine and soft as the snowball, it is also very smooth. The premise is that you have to smooth its hair. I'm going out for a while. Can I bring you roast duck when I come back? Speaking of roast duck, Shen Shuwei was really greedy, but the roast duck here is not as delicious as hers. When she returns to the palace, she will roast two to satisfy her craving. The tiger lion beast is not an unreasonable beast. It happily accepted the temptation of smooth hair and food. Shen Shuwei then arranged for the carriage to leave the palace. This was Shen Shuwei's second time leaving the palace. Looking at the huge luxurious carriage parked in front of her, she still sighed that the feeling of riding a luxurious carriage is completely different from that of an ordinary carriage, just like the feeling of a modern sedan worth tens of thousands of yuan and a luxury car worth 500,000, 600,000, or even millions of yuan. Sitting in the carriage, you can't feel the bumps, and there are cakes and tea in the carriage. Yanyu secretly left the palace today to look for someone, and saw a luxurious carriage driving towards the palace gate from a distance. She asked the guard beside her in confusion, who is in that carriage? The guard replied, it's Princess Juyu. Princess Juyu? Yanyu looked at the extremely luxurious carriage, and then looked at her own carriage. Although it was also luxurious, it was still one level lower than Feng Wu's carriage. Isn't she the daughter of the national teacher? Why do she eat and use better than her? Yanyu was so angry every time she saw Feng Wu, but she had no way to deal with it. She looked at the carriage that had driven away. What did Feng Wu want to do when he left the palace? She held up her skirt and got on the carriage and ordered, follow the carriage in front. Yes, master. The guard swung his riding whip and chased after him. After Shen Shuwei's carriage left the palace, it went straight to the inn. After arriving, Shen Shuwei opened the carriage door and walked out. The little eunuch driving the carriage had prepared a horse stool, and she stepped down on the horse stool. You just wait here. The little eunuchs responded, here. Shen Shuwei walked towards the inn with cheerful steps. The distance was not far and he arrived in a short while. After entering, she went straight upstairs to Xiao Jinyan's guest room, raised her hand and knocked on the door. After a while, the door opened from the inside. It was Xiao Jinyan who opened the door, and his brows were furrowed, as if he was uncomfortable. Husband, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? Xiao Jinyan pretended to be relaxed and said, I have a headache, let's come in first. Good. After Shen Shuwei entered, Xiao Jinyan closed the door. Yanyu looked up and watched Feng Wu enter the Tianzi guest room on the second floor, a trace of doubt flashing in her eyes. Who will Feng Wu meet? Why be so sneaky? Was he doing something shameful? In the guest room, Shen Shuwei noticed that Xiao Jinyan's face looked a little ugly and worried, so he checked his pulse. Xiao Jinyan's internal injuries suffered last time have healed, and his pulse is now stable. Husband, did you suddenly have a headache? How long has it been hurting? Xiao Jinyan said, it hurt for a while, but it's much better now. Before Xiaoju came, Xiao Jinyan had been in pain for a long time, as if something was torn in his head, and the pain was unbearable. Shen Chuwei remembered that Xiao Jinyan also had headaches before, and then she remembered it. She said with a look of surprise, it won't be the same as last time? Have you remembered? Shen Chu said slightly excitedly, you remembered me. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju in confusion, I always remember you, do you need to think about it? Shen Chuwei was also stunned for a moment and looked at Xiao Jinyan in front of him, but you don't remember what happened between us before. Xiao Jinyan said, how could I forget? Well. Shen Chuwei thought for a while and suddenly understood, you remember the past and forget what happened before. We are now in Nanzhao Kingdom. Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a moment, and after thinking about it carefully, he understood the meaning of Xiaoju's words. Xiaoju had also said that he had a similar situation before. You call me husband? Shen Chu nodded slightly, yes, we got married, but you forgot. Xiao Jinyan felt regretful when he found out that he couldn't remember the process of getting married to Xiaoju. His tone was a little urgent, then how can I remember it? Shen Chu said softly, the Imperial Preceptor asked me to take my boyfriend to meet him. I haven't said anything about our marriage yet, so don't reveal the secret. The Imperial Preceptor has the ability to restore memory. Let him help when the time comes. Xiao Jinyan asked doubtfully, why don't you call him dad? I can't scream. After Shen Chuwei finished speaking, she realized something was wrong. She stared at Xiao Jinyan without blinking, do you know that the Imperial Master is Feng Wu's father? Xiao Jinyan said, the fact that you are the daughter of the Imperial Master is not a secret in the palace. Shen Chuwei was stunned for several seconds and realized something was wrong. She was talking about Feng Wu, and Xiao Jinyan said she. She had a bad feeling, pointed at her nose and asked, who am I? Xiao Jinyan said, Xiaoju. Shen Chuwei said again, name. Xiao Jinyan replied with 3 words, Feng Wu. Shen Chuwei was stunned on the spot. No wonder Xiao Jinyan called her Xiaoju, something was wrong when he was promoting the Miao tribe. It turned out that he thought she was Feng Wu. Even now, he thinks of her as Feng Wu. She was a little sad. She always felt that the relationship between Xiao Jinyan and Feng Wu was more than just childhood sweethearts. Seeing that she didn't speak, Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but feel anxious. Xiaoju, what's wrong? Shen Chuwei explained, I'm not Feng Wu, I'm Shen Chuwei. She and I just look similar. This time it was Xiao Jinyan who was stunned. He had forgotten what happened before and couldn't realize what was going on for a while. After being stunned for a long time, he finally uttered a sentence, Shen Chuwei. How is this possible? Shen Chuwei angrily told Xiao Jinyan the recent events, and said angrily, you like Feng Wu, don't you? Xiao Jinyan didn't know how to answer this question, because he still fully understood what happened. Feng Wu was missing, and Shen Chuwei, who was very similar to Feng Wu, was his wife. He had a headache. How could something like this happen? Shen Chuwei looked at him aggrievedly, if you don't say anything, I'll take it as your acquiescence. Xiao Jinyan grabbed her hand and said, I like Xiaoju, but how could you not be Xiaoju? Shen Chuwei heard him admit it in person without any hesitation, and felt extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, Xiao Jinyan didn't remember it before, otherwise he would have suspected that he liked her because she was a substitute. Even so, it is true that Xiao Jinyan liked Feng Wu when he was in Nanzhao Kingdom. Then Feng Wu or me, who do you choose? Xiao Jinyan stared at Xiaoju, who called herself Shen Chuwei, for a while. Her angry look was exactly the same as Xiaoju's, as if she was afraid that others wouldn't know she was angry. I haven't figured out the specific situation yet, so you let me choose. How do I know if you deliberately made it up to set me up? It's not like you've never done this before. Shen Shuwei couldn't help rolling her eyes in anger. She was so angry that her heart, liver, spleen, and kidneys were hurting. He still thought he was joking? She shook off Xiao Jinyan's hand and said solemnly, "You are going to lose me." Xiao Jinyan hurriedly held her hand again, fearing that she would suddenly leave him. "Xiaoju." Shen Shuwei tried hard to pull back her hand, but failed. Xiao Jinyan was a martial artist and was stronger than her. She still said angrily, "Don't call me Xiaoju, who knows who you are calling?" Xiao Jinyan looked at her serious and angry face, and it didn't seem fake. "Didn't you say you would take me to see the national teacher? After we see him and recover our memories, we will talk about this matter." Okay. After thinking about it, he still felt that this was the best way. Shen Shuwei also felt that it was unfair to let Xiao Jinyan choose at this time. Xiao Jinyan didn't remember her, but only remembered Feng Wu, and would definitely choose Feng Wu. If he remembered the past and still insisted on choosing Feng Wu, then there was no need for her to stay. Of course, when you recover your memory, you must choose between me and Feng Wu, either her or me. If you want to hug her left and right, no way. Xiao Jinyan, who didn't remember the past, really didn't know what to say. He thought the person in front of him was Xiaoju, Feng Wu. But she said no. Shen Shuwei sat aside angrily, and didn't understand why such a bloody thing happened to her. Seeing that she was still angry, Xiao Jinyan reached out and pulled her sleeve. "When are we going to see the master of the state?" Shen Shuwei pondered for a long time. It would be better to figure this out as soon as possible, and she also wanted to know Xiao Jinyan's choice very much. Is it to choose the childhood sweetheart of the past, or her as his wife now? It's better to do it today than to choose a day. Okay, I'll change my clothes. Xiao Jinyan couldn't wait to see the master of the state and recover his memory as soon as possible. He picked up the clothes on the hanger and began to put them on slowly. Shen Shuwei sat aside and watched. Xiao Jinyan was also a super handsome man, with a temperament somewhat different from that of the national teacher. What if the husband who had been with her for several years really chose Feng Wu? It was naturally a bit unwilling to let go. However, if she didn't let go, she would still feel uncomfortable. She sighed in her heart and could only let it go. Soon, Xiao Jinyan dressed neatly and stood in front of Shen Shuwei, reaching out to hold Xiaoju's hand, but was dodged. Shen Shuwei clapped her hands, looked at Xiao Jinyan, who was much taller than her, and snorted, "You are not allowed to hold hands before you choose." Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei turned around and walked to the door, opened the door and walked out. Xiao Jinyan shook his head helplessly, followed him out, and closed the door before leaving. "Good night. Please vote for the monthly ticket and recommendation ticket. New book: The Fake Daughter Only Wants to Be a Salted Fish and Is Spoiled. Please collect. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 580. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju, who was walking in front of him, took 2 quick steps to catch up, and grabbed her hand. Shen Shuwei struggled in dissatisfaction, but was held tighter by Xiao Jinyan. "Don't be angry." Shen Shuwei looked up at Xiao Jinyan and said angrily, "Why am I angry, don't you know?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her, and said seriously, "I know, but I think you are Xiaoju." Shen Shuwei. Xiao Jinyan said again, "The national teacher also thinks you are Xiaoju, isn't it?" Shen Shuwei explained, "That's because Feng Wu and I look alike, and the national teacher hasn't seen his daughter for almost 10 years, so it's normal to make a mistake. You may not know that there are many people in this world who look alike but are not related by blood." Xiao Jinyan said, "Looking alike, there are indeed quite a few people who are like Xiaoju, but your personality is similar to Xiaoju, and so is your feeling." Shen Shuwei turned to look at Xiao Jinyan after hearing this, and touched his chin. "You have some truth in what you said. Xiao Jinyan was a little happy. You also think you are Feng Wu, right? Shen Chuwei shook his head. If I am Feng Wu, why would I become Shen Chuwei? The two of them have nothing to do with each other, and don't the Shen family even know their own daughter? The original owner's personality is not like Feng Wu at all, but the opposite. For example, the original owner is not a glutton and sleepy person, nor does she like pets, and is ambitious, and so on. It is completely different from the Feng Wu they talk about. And she comes from modern times, separated by a whole space and time, which is even more impossible. Yanyu waited outside for a long time and saw Feng Wu coming down from upstairs. When she saw the man next to Feng Wu clearly, she widened her eyes in disbelief. Isn't this the young man she met on the street 2 days ago? What is the relationship between him and Feng Wu? Yanyu followed with doubts. Xiao Jinyan guessed, maybe it was a mistake for some reason. Shen Chuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan in front of him. Are you afraid that it will be difficult to choose at that time, so you hope that I am Feng Wu? Then you will be disappointed. Feng Wu and I are not the same person, and Shen Chuwei was covered by Xiao Jinyan before she finished speaking. Just when she was confused, she heard Xiao Jinyan whispered, someone is following. Shen Chuwei immediately understood and stopped talking. Xiao Jinyan whispered, you go out first. Shen Chuwei doesn't know martial arts. If she follows Xiao Jinyan, she may not even be able to find the person who is following her. I'll wait for you at the shop selling pastries. Xiao Jinyan nodded and walked away. Shen Chuwei went to the carriage first to wait for Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the pillar not far away and walked over. Yanyu showed a shocked expression. If she heard it right, Feng Wu was a fake. This was undoubtedly the best news for her. Looking up again, she found that the person had left. Yanyu turned around and was about to leave. As soon as she turned around, she saw someone standing behind her. She looked up and saw the young master who was with the fake Feng Wu just now. The cold eyes made her back cold. Xiao Jinyan saw the woman's face and felt that she looked familiar. She looked like Princess Yanyu. Who are you? What do you want to do by following me secretly? Yanyu felt guilty and excited at the same time. She had always wanted to see him again. How could she not be happy now that she saw him? But the timing was wrong. Young master, don't you remember me? We met on the street 2 days ago. Xiao Jinyan didn't remember her at all. Although he suspected that she was Yanyu, he didn't want to know. Don't remember, why are you following me? Yanyu was looking at him expectantly, but he didn't remember her? Although she was not a fairy, her appearance was rare in Nanzao. He didn't remember? Although Yanyu was disappointed and somewhat dissatisfied, she still said shyly, I was just passing by and saw you. I wanted to say hello to you, but I saw you were with someone else, so I didn't go up to disturb you. Xiao Jinyan didn't believe what she said at all. He said coldly, if you don't tell the truth, don't blame me for being rude. Seeing that he was angry, Yanyu said a little aggrievedly, Sir, I am a princess and I have everything. I just followed you because I saw you and wanted to make friends with you. At this moment, 2 guards quickly came over and protected the princess. They all drew their swords and pointed them at Xiao Jinyan. Yanyu shouted angrily, what are you doing? The guard said, Princess, I'm afraid he will do you harm. Yanyu glanced at Xiao Jinyan, then looked at the guards and ordered, this princess and him just have some misunderstandings, you all retreat for this princess. The guards looked at each other, then put away their swords, I obey your orders. Then they retreated behind the princess. Xiao Jinyan was just guessing, but now it has been confirmed that the woman in front of him is Yanyu, who has changed a lot since she was a child. It is not a good thing to get entangled with her. Since it is a misunderstanding, let's say goodbye. Xiao Jinyan turned around and left. Yanyu finally met him. How could she let him go so easily? She chased after him, "Sir, sir, please stay." Xiao Jinyan frowned and looked back at Yanyu, "Princess, is there anything else?" Yanyu said, "Meeting is fate, you know I am a princess now, I didn't want to hide it from you, let's be friends, okay? I have no intention of making friends at the moment. Thank you princess for your kindness. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first." After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he left without looking back at Yanyu. Yanyu still wanted to say a few words, but when she found that he left without looking back, she gritted her teeth angrily. She didn't know what the relationship between him and the impostor was. But it doesn't matter, Fengwu is fake, and daring to impersonate Fengwu is a capital offense. Yanyu finally felt a little happy after being depressed for several days. She wanted to return to the palace and tell the prince brother about this as soon as possible, so that the prince brother would not have to please the impostor. Yanyu looked away and led people back to the palace. Shen Shuwei stood beside the carriage, waiting left and right to see Xiao Jinyan, and couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Could something have happened? Shen Shuwei, who was still angry just now, could no longer care about being angry. Her heart was filled with worries about Xiao Jinyan. She held up her skirt and hurried towards the inn. Before she could even take 2 steps, someone grabbed her wrist. She turned around and saw Xiao Jinyan standing behind her, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Jinyan asked, "Where are you going?" Shen Chu said softly, "I'm looking for you." "Why did you come just now? Who is following us?" Xiao Jinyan said, "The person following us is the princess of Nanzhao Kingdom." She must have bad intentions." Shen Shuwei still remembered how she made things difficult for her in every way when she first entered the palace. Xiao Jinyan originally wanted to tell Xiaju, but she knew that Yanyu was not a good person, so she nodded in agreement. "I think so too, it would be better to have less contact with her. I don't like her, so naturally I don't like to be in contact with her. Why make it difficult for me?" Shen Shuwei pulled Xiao Jinyan towards the carriage, "Let's go to the palace first." Xiao Jinyan let her hold her hand. Thinking that she was not allowed to hold her hand just now, he took the initiative to hold her hand again, and the corners of his mouth curved slightly. "Good." After getting on the carriage, Shen Shuwei suddenly smelled a scent. She looked sideways and saw the boss taking out the shortbread from the oven with a shovel. "You've seen it all, wouldn't it be appropriate not to buy it?" Xiao Jinyan saw her standing motionless on the carriage. He raised his head and saw her beautiful eyes staring at the shortbread seller. They looked like freshly baked shortbread. "Want to eat?" Shen Chu raised his chin slightly and said, "It's the tigress that wants to eat it." Xiao Jinyan knew that she would remember that she was angry again. Just like before, she would blame the tiger, lion, or Snowball, or sometimes others, for wanting to eat. "Okay, I'll buy it." Xiao Jinyan turned around and came to the shop. Thinking of the appetite of tigers and lions, he bought 20 of them. Shen Shuwei ran over holding the hem of her skirt, fearing that Xiao Jinyan would buy it. Even a tiger, a lion, or a lion could eat a lot, and she could eat a lot by herself. When she saw several oil paper bags in Xiao Jinyan's hands, she smiled. Xiao Jinyan raised the oil paper bag in his hand and asked her, 20, is that enough?" Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, that's enough, I can eat 5. Xiao Jinyan took a step forward and said, "Let's go." After the 2 of them got on the carriage, the young eunuch drove the carriage back to the palace. The carriage was very spacious. After Xiao Jinyan sat firmly, he opened one of the oil paper bags and handed it to her, "Eat a piece first." Shen Chu smelled the fragrance and couldn't help but want to try it. He didn't show any pretense. He happily picked up a piece and put it into his mouth and took a bite. He put his other hand under his chin and continued. The shortbread was crispy on the outside and filled with sesame seeds inside. Tasty. Xiao Jinyan turned his head and looked at her with a satisfied expression on her face. This was what he liked to see the most. Eating with her made her especially appetizing. Shen Chu took 2 bites in a row and found that Xiao Jinyan had been staring at him but not eating. "Aren't you going to eat?" "Eat it." Xiao Jinyan picked up a piece and imitated Xiao Ju by putting a hand under his chin, then opened his mouth and took a bite. No matter how careful he was, crumbs of shortbread would fall into his palm. Shen Chu took a brief look at Xiao Jinyan's movements of eating shortcakes. Sure enough, even a good-looking person eating the same movements as her was still very noble. She looked away and continued to eat shortbread, 1 bite at a time, and she finished 3 pieces in a short time. When the carriage enters the palace gate, there is a routine inspection by guards. When the guard opened the carriage door and saw a strange man inside, he asked, "Princess Juyu, who is this?" Shen Chu glanced at Xiao Jinyan and said, "He is my friend, and my father wants to see him. He has only been working as a guard at the palace gate for 3 years. How do you know who the father of Princess Juyu is?" "May I ask who the father of Princess Juyu is?" Shen Chuwei was also stunned for a moment. They didn't know that Princess Juyu's father was the Imperial Master? But think about it, many people in the palace don't know that the Imperial Master lives in Wushao Palace. Master, Imperial Master. The guard was stunned for a few seconds before he realized what he said. He couldn't help but widen his eyes. He had been guarding the gate for 3 years and had only heard about the Imperial Preceptor from other people's mouths. He had never seen the Imperial Preceptor before. He learned that the Imperial Preceptor was back. "Now, I don't know if I can even see the true face of Master Lushan. It turns out that the Imperial Master has returned, I just knew it." When Shen Chuwei saw the guard's surprised expression, he knew that the prestige of the National Preceptor was not something he could rely on. "Can we be released now?" The guard nodded immediately. "Of course, Princess Juyu, please." After the guard let him go, the young eunuch drove the carriage and continued walking. Shen Chu turned his head slightly to look at Xiao Jinyan and saw him opening the curtain to look outside. His current memory was that of Nanzhao Kingdom. He should be familiar with it after spending so many years in the palace. "Are you afraid of the Imperial Master?" Xiao Jinyan put down the curtain and looked back at Xiaju, who is not afraid of the Imperial Master? It's not so much fear as respect. Shen Chuwei nodded thoughtfully, "That's right. When I first learned that he was the Imperial Master, I was also frightened. However, the Imperial Master is still easier to get along with, even though he has taken advantage of Fengwu." Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but said, "You don't believe in the eyesight of the Imperial Master?" Shen Chu said softly, "Believe me, no matter how good your eyesight is, there will be times when you make mistakes. Of course, the Imperial Master is still very powerful." Xiao Jinyan shook his head helplessly. After the carriage stopped at the gate of Sanssouci Palace, Xiao Jinyan got out of the carriage first and looked at the familiar Sanssouci Palace as if it was yesterday. He turned around to help Xiaju. Shen Chuwei got off the carriage neatly with the help of Xiao Jinyan, and then they walked in side by side. As soon as I walked in, I saw a tigan lying on the arch bridge, its huge claws stirring in the running water, which scared the fish away. Seeing Xiaoju coming back, Tigress stopped playing in the water, shook his hair, and walked towards Xiaoju. When it got closer, it rubbed Xiaoju's arm with its huge head. Shen Chu rubbed its head slightly, took out a piece of shortbread, opened the oil paper package, picked up a piece of shortbread and waved it in front of the tigress. "I'm not lying, I brought you something to eat." The tigan hummed happily, then opened its mouth wide and waited to be fed. Shen Chuwei didn't let it down either, and fed the shortbread in his hand into its mouth. Xiao Jinyan looked at the huge body of the tiger and the lion, which was more than twice as big. He couldn't help but sigh, the tiger and the lion have grown so big. Shen Chuwei fed the shortbread and said, "How big was it before?" Xiao Jinyan smiled and said, "It's bigger than a dog." Shen Shuwei only made a slight comparison to know how much longer the tiger-lion beast was. That's a lot of growth. Xiao Jinyan said again, the tiger, lion, and tiger are only close to Xiaju. Are you still saying that you don't talk about Xiaju? Shen Chu said softly, you don't understand, I have had this ability since I was a child. Xiao Jinyan said matter-of-factly, you have indeed had this ability since you were a child. Shen Chuwei. But she came from modern times. She fed the last piece of shortbread in her hand into the tiger's mouth and rubbed its head. Stop talking about this, I will take you to find the national preceptor. Xiao Jinyan nodded, okay. Shen Chuwei walked into the main hall with Xiao Jinyan, saw Xuehui from a distance, and shouted, where is the imperial master? Xuehui replied, go back to Princess Juyuo, the master is in the study. Shen Chuwei went to the study once and took Xiao Jinyan straight to the study. When she reached the door of the study, Shen Chuwei was still a little nervous. She was nervous that Mr. Zhang Qiaoshi would embarrass Xiao Jinyan. Good night, Spicy.